and welcome to our regular meeting of City Council. It's Monday, October 5th, and it's 5:34. We welcome everybody to come. It's nice to see a live audience out there, and we are still doing YouTube live. Let's see, would you please call roll?
Yes, ma'am. Councilman Sluter?
Here.
Councilman Abear?
Here.
Councilman Torgerson?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Dow?
Here.
And Mayor Fitch?
Here.
Please stand for the invocation and pledge. Bless those present, O Lord, that the business conducted here this evening will be for the continued betterment of our city, and in keeping with thy commands, we ask in God's name. Amen.
Amen.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, our procedure for the evening pursuant to Executive Order number 20-69 issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20th, 2020, and as extended by Executive Order 20-246 until November 1st, 2020, municipalities may conduct their meetings of governing boards without having a quorum of its members physically present or at any specific location. Under the order, municipalities may use communications media technology such as telephonic or video conferencing as provided by Florida statutes for members of the council appearing remotely and for public participation. A quorum of council members is physically present for this meeting along with a minimal number of key staff, and this meeting is open for in-public attendance and participation. We are continuing to follow the governor's emergency orders and the city's emergency declarations regarding COVID-19, and for this meeting are also providing for public participation through YouTube Live and call-in. I'd now like to ask the city attorney to explain the procedures for public comment and participation in this meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. These rules are the city's rules for using communications media technology as provided by Section 120.54, Paragraph 5B2 Florida statutes, and these were adopted by the City Council on April 6, 2020. So these are for the members of the public who want to participate through our media technology. For those who are here this evening, it will be our usual rules and procedure. But for those who are watching on the YouTube live stream, members of the public who want to participate were asked to submit their questions or comments on the agenda items prior to the meeting with their name and address and a reference to the agenda item on which they wish to comment by email to the city clerk at gulfbreezefl.gov, or by regular mail to the city clerk's attention at the City of Gulf Breeze, 1070 Shoreline Drive, Gulf Breeze, Florida 32561. And all written comments for the meeting were to be received by 4 p.m. Central Time today. Members of the public wanting to comment on an agenda item through the use of communications media technology during the meeting, or anyone who wants to participate in the public forum at the end of the meeting, can call in to the following toll-free number, 1-888-585-9008, call code 1-863-19955, and that number is also posted on the city website on the agenda. Hold and your call will be answered in turn. Comments on agenda items and in the public forum may also be made via the chat box on YouTube Live. And the city clerk will read any of the comments that have been received prior to the meeting or on YouTube Live. The standard rules apply, with comments being limited to 3 minutes and applicable to the agenda topic being considered. And if anyone wishes to appeal a decision made with respect to any matter considered at this meeting or in any public hearing held in the course of the meeting, then the person will need to ensure a verbatim record of the proceeding is made, and that would include testimony or any evidence comments on which an appeal is to be based. And you can ask for a copy of the recording of the meeting from the city clerk if you wish to do that. And that's all.
All right, thank you. At this time, we will call for approval of minutes. The first step will be from the September 9th, 2020 regular meeting. Is there anyone from the public who has any comments or questions?
ma'am, I've not received any on the minutes.
Okay, council, do we have a motion?
Move for approval. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or corrections from council? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes 5-0. Our next minutes to approve would be September 14th, 2020, the special meeting minutes. Leslie, public?
No, ma'am, I've not received any comments on the minutes prior or recommended.
Okay. All right, do we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Passes 5-0. Our last set of minutes to approve would be September 17th, 2020, the special meeting minutes.
Yes, no, ma'am, I've not received any public comment.
All right. Do we have a motion?
Move for approval.
All right, second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion from council? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes 5-0. Now we'll move on to ordinances, and this will be the first reading of ordinance number 09-2020. Leslie, would you please read this? for us?
Mayor, if we may, staff would like to request to table this until your next regularly scheduled meeting. We received comments from a communications provider very late this afternoon,
Okay.
and in conference with the city attorney, we would just like more time to review those comments. And if they're substantial, we would have to redo the first reading anyway. So,
Sure, okay, that's fine. Is everyone, all council members in agreement with that? Maybe?
Yeah.
Okay, JB,
Yes.
you got it?
Yeah. Yep.
All right, we'll table ordinance 09-2020 and revisit that at another meeting. At this time, we will convene as the Community Redevelopment Agency Board of Directors. And first, we will approve our prior minutes from CRA, and that was September 14th. Do we have a motion, any public comment?
No, ma'am, I've not
Okay,
received.
do we have a motion?
Go for approval. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any council discussion or questions? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And that passes 5-0. Now we'll go on to the action item, which, Samantha, are you gonna start with that, or Craig?
Sure.
All right, Mr. Carmichael, are you gonna lead us?
Yeah,
Chamberlain,
sure.
Are you gonna lead us with that?
Sure. And so we had publicly bid for the replacement of the emergency generators at our traffic lights along Highway 98. We had received 0 bids, so we had requested at a previous meeting to just seek bids from qualified vendors, which we did. And we received the low bid back of $14,017, and that'll be for the materials for the replacement of those 5 emergency generators for hurricane preparedness. And so as I explained in the previous meeting, the existing generators have gone through their life cycle. And what those do, those kick on with natural gas in the event of loss of power.
All right. Do we have any questions or comments?
That, online, just to make sure there's nothing. All right, do we have anybody on the line that would like to comment on the CRA agenda item?
All right. Okay, council, do we have a motion?
Move for approval.
All right, well, we have a second and motion, and any discussion regarding this?
I got a question. Are we keeping the old ones? Are they still functional?
We'll have our natural gas techs go through them, but from what I've been told, they have gone through their complete life cycle. So it would, we would not want to rely on that generator to have it in storage for emergency situations.
Seems pretty inexpensive for 5 generators.
That's just the materials, and so our staff will do the install
So we'll do that in-house.
in-house. Yes.
Very good.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Hearing none, passes 5-0. All right, next we will go, and you stay right there, to our next item, discussion item, and that's an update on the October Town Center business promotions. And so, Mr. Chamberlain, I think you can lead us with that.
Sure. We have heard outcry from the community. Obviously, everybody understands with the lack of traffic going through Highway 98, going from about 60,000 cars a day to several thousand cars a day. Our core businesses have really suffered with that loss of, pass-through traffic. And so, community group was started on Facebook, Save the Breeze from the Barge Blunder, which kind of kicked it off. Catherine Minshaw, local longtime resident, has kind of been leading that effort, and so we wanted to be a part of supporting that, and so we reached out to her, and the mayor and I and some department heads held an initial kickoff meeting where a lot of really good ideas were thrown around, and basically we came to the conclusion that we wanted to have some sort of kickoff event that would be the beginning of a series of events aimed at promoting our local businesses. And so really the idea is just to get people in our local businesses and coming up with some sort of promotional schemes or activities to get them to spend money. And so the idea with the kickoff event, obviously the goal of the event is to give people an opportunity to sell merchandise at the event, but if that's not an option, which it's not for a lot of our local businesses, just to simply come out and promote the business. And so that's where the idea of a trunk or treat style, Halloween style event, where even we could potentially provide the candy, and our businesses are struggling. We don't want to ask them to come up with the couple $100 it might be to buy the candy. So just really fully supporting our businesses and giving them an opportunity to promote themselves. And again, one of the ideas that we're throwing out is using some of our CRA dollars to directly promote our businesses. So maybe within this event, giving away a $100 voucher every 5 minutes, or having some sort of scavenger hunt. And so again, y'all hear me throwing a lot of ideas out, and this is kind of all part of brainstorming sessions, but we held that initial meeting. We kind of chose a time and place, but before we went any further, we wanted to bring this to y'all's attention and kind of start a discussion and see if y'all are open to that idea, and maybe set a budget limit where I can do a budget amendment and we can postpone a currently approved budget item and divert those funds into economic development. And so there's a lot of tools that we can take from other communities, whether it be just straight up rent assistance to get people over this hump, or again, the voucher ideas or the scavenger hunt ideas, kind of a lot of different tools we can use, but the basic idea is to take our TIF dollars and direct that, inject that directly into our local businesses to help with this, detrimental time.
Okay. All right, council, you may have heard some about this already, and that was our initial meeting, and I believe Craig is going to schedule one for later on this week, pending just discussion and thoughts that you have regarding us, making these moves and just looking at not just one activity probably, but a series of varied activities. We just don't know what yet. We did have a good group, and I think it'll be an even larger group of small business representatives and restaurants who come next time just to talk through, what is practical for them or what they feel like would make a difference and how we can help, basically. So, open for any questions, comments from any of you?
Well, I fully support it. I think it's great what you're doing. I'd like to see us do additional things maybe sooner than October 31st, or whatever the targeted date is.
Okay.
Whether it's using our social media platforms and our website to spotlight specific types of businesses that would remind folks how important it is to buy from today so that they'll be here tomorrow. And some of the things that come to mind for me are like our gas stations. I think we need to be cognizant of that when we're making our trip around the horn now, that when we need to fuel up, which we will more frequently, that we need to do it here and make that effort. So anything along those lines I think is terrific, and I appreciate what everybody's done so far.
Okay.
I agree. I'd like to see them do it.
Go ahead, Tom.
I'd certainly support that. I'd like to see us get it kicked off as soon as we can. Maybe also get the local chamber of commerce involved to promote maybe expos or something on a larger scale, just to feature local people. So, let's use our chamber and different ideas they can come up with.
Okay, all right, and I believe we reached out to them, and so we were anticipating that it would be a Randy?
was just gonna ask, is maybe have you had the opportunity to talk to some of the businesses to see who's feeling the worst impacts as opposed to some that may not be? Some might be picking up more business and others may be losing business, you know?
Correct. We were talking about that today, that some of our restaurants might be doing well with people not being able to go to Pensacola, you know, for their date nights and such. But after our meeting last week, we started today by getting just a survey of our brick and mortar businesses, and we counted a little over 200. And so tomorrow we're going to whittle that down and see, you know, the type of businesses that would actually be interested in an event like this, and that's exactly the idea. Is next steps is reaching out and putting together a larger focus group. So our first focus group last week consisted of just 4 retail businesses, the 4 that were mentioned in the article, and the thoughts behind that was, you know, they were in the newspaper, they were on the news, so people have probably been speaking to them about this, and so we thought that was just a good place to start. But certainly we want to get the input of a larger group, and that's the idea of the next meeting.
It'd be just nice to know which ones could use support from the locals to get out there and try to help, you know, spur a little economic recovery for them a little bit. You know.
I'll point out that group grew to over 2,000 members in 2 days, and I haven't checked it in the last couple of days, but you know, it's multi-thousand members, and it's just a great platform. It does expand outside the 32561 Gulf Breeze. SIPO kind of includes the larger area, and that's also part of our conversation, whether we want to keep this event strictly to the city of Gulf Breeze. Now, all the benefits from the CRA would be limited to our CRA businesses, but as far as inviting other groups, I don't know if y'all read in the paper, the Bridge the Gap, our neighbors in Pensacola kind of had a similar idea. The Studer Institute is doing something the Friday or Saturday, the Sunday before Halloween in Pensacola, and then has invited all of our local businesses to a free booth in Pensacola for a market style event. So.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, but it might be something to try to tie in more to like monthly thing, almost like a gallery thing, like we have downtown that brings a lot of people and a lot of energy and all that. And you could have it gallery this side, South 98, gallery North 98, you know, so it doesn't affect just one business, you know, I mean, something like that. And something we've always looked at as part of the CRA is trying to get everybody into our new code for our signage. This might be a good time with the amount of signs that are damaged with some of our local businesses to look at coming up with a plan to get everybody into compliance with the new monument type signs that we're trying to move towards. As people are looking to fix their signs and stuff.
Is that me, Ed?
Guess it didn't like me.
That I really liked you.
I know, yeah, I guess so. It might be, you know, this might be a good time to step back and look at that and trying to move that. I know there's a lot of things going, but there's going to be a lot of money spent on signs here in the next, as they can get to them. It's like fences right now.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to get the signs.
No, we've already been working with a couple of large players on that.
So this would be a great time, but as people are getting ready to spend money on a sign, let's try to look at helping them out and getting in compliance with that.
What about, Councilman, a micro grant to help further promote
Yeah,
that?
something like that, yeah.
Sign
So,
grant.
yeah,
As
because
part of
we've
CR.
discussed facade grants,
Right.
and so the monument sign compliance grant, something like that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good discussion. Any other discussion? All right, and that's really not a voting item, it's just, we wanted to talk about it, see, get your feedback on it. So,
Your mic.
I'm talking to you,
Thank you.
am I now?
Yes.
Okay. Sensing that everybody's in support of it, and we will just sort of, Craig can just take back to the committee the things that we've talked about tonight, and then they can keep working, and maybe we can get something earlier.
Yeah.
You know, that just wouldn't have to be as big,
Yeah.
as we were anticipating.
So October 19th, I can bring back a proposal with a budget idea, talk about what we'll need to eliminate from the current budget, which I think there's some things that we can postpone certainly. And to speak briefly on something before, we had talked about bringing in ECAT trolleys for the ferry system, so maybe that's something to explore, and maybe having a night we can link up a couple of the trolleys and do a tour of the town, or so to speak. And so that's something I think we can do expeditiously.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Craig, for your work on that. And so do we have any new business for CRA? All right, and public forum, is there anyone who would like to speak for public forum for CRA? Okay.
What do I do?
Well, it's for the CRA.
Oh.
Gary, would you're in the CRA, but it's,
No.
okay. I thought you wanted the big agenda.
Sorry.
All right, and Leslie, have we had any, contact you? All right, so we have, no one speaking for public forum, so we will adjourn the CRA meeting and go back to our city council regular meeting. At this time, we will move on to resolutions, and first resolution is 60-2020, ratifying and adopting resolution 59-2020, which is rescinding curfew. Samantha?
I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I've spoken with each one of you individually, and of course, that was a temporary measure which was put in place, and at that time, we had concerns about the Bob Sykes Bridge, and it was at the recommendation of our area law enforcement, and so I guess, again, at the recommendation of our law enforcement, it is that it be lifted.
Okay. All right, so is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this? As far as those of you from the public are here, I tend to look at Leslie because we haven't had public in so long, so if I miss you, speak up.
No, ma'am, I've not received anything online.
Okay. All right, council, do we have a motion and a
So
second?
moved. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. All right, that passes 5-0. Our next resolution is number 68-2020, and that's adopting a revised schedule of authorized positions for the fiscal year 2021. Samantha?
Thank you. I'm going to ask Dennis McKinnon with CTA to come join us. This originally was purely a discussion item, but in preparation for the agenda, we realized that it actually presented an opportunity to clarify a matter, and that is you had just approved your schedule of authorized positions for the year. And in that schedule, it provides for the staff of the Gulf Breeze Financial Services, but we realized that we left off Capital Trust Agency. And so whereas the city knows that those are one and the same staff, we thought it's just best to take advantage of the fact this was on the agenda anyway and include CTA. So operationally, there is no difference whatsoever. Staff for Gulf Breeze Financial Services are the staff for CTA, but the resolution is attached, and you see that that only change, which is underlined, is to add Capital Trust Agency. So that's just for any member of the public to better understand how the staffing works. The reason for this agenda item is because, of course, we have been moving forward with housekeeping items as it relates to updating administrative policies and procedures during the last 2.5 years of an operations audit. And as you know, we received the preliminary and tentative audit, and then just last week we received the final. And at the same time, we also received the retirement of Mr. Ed Gray, which was effective the end of September. And so the bond market is clearly asking what is next for the Capital Trust Agency, and it is important for the continuity of operations that we put that plan out for our public and those that Dennis is working with every day. Just a reminder that Capital Trust Agency has helped to finance more than $2.5 billion in important community projects like charter schools, affordable housing, and assisted living facilities as the bond conduit issuer. And what that translates to is that there is an annual contribution to the City of Gulf Breeze operations of about $1 million a year. Without this revenue, Gulf Breeze property taxes would be about 78% higher. And so this Capital Trust Agency is an entity which was created by the City of Gulf Breeze and benefits our citizens to be able to keep the cost of living low greatly. And so within your staff memo, I've included for you just a recap of the city's affirmative responses to those findings of the operations reports. Again, these findings all relate to administrative functions, making sure that we are doing everything we can to increase the public's understanding of what CTA does, and updating policies and procedures, working with the CTA Board of Directors. And so as a result, you see recommendations from me as your city manager about how we can best accomplish those things. And I would like to just briefly go through those, if I may, and then you stop me if you hear any recommendation that you want to question further or discuss. Otherwise, we'll get to the end and further discuss, I'm sure. But the recommendations based on the findings listed above are one, biannual public workshops between the CTA and the City Council to review CTA programs and provide periodic reports on the status of potential programs and other pertinent matters. This also has been discussed with the CTA Board of Directors. They love the idea of providing those regular workshops with the City Council where you're really hearing their business plan, the goals and the benchmarks that they have set out for their agency and with Dennis, and it's really an opportunity for them to share with you what it is that they're prioritizing and perhaps why some programs, rather than others. So we think doing that on a biannual basis would be very productive. Also, your CTA Board of Directors is comprised of individuals which the mayor and council appoint, and they are some of the most volunteer-oriented and most highly respected citizens that we have in Gulf Breeze. And so I think that's another reason in continuing to build the public's trust that they hear directly from that board and the good work that they're doing. My second recommendation is to relocate the CTA and GBFS operations to City Hall. To accommodate the necessary office space, I'm recommending relocating Community Development Services and Code Enforcement to the prior CTA building on Fairpoint Drive. So that's these offices that are right here. And so there is a mutual benefit in doing that. Obviously, as it relates to Dennis and his staff, I don't foresee them moving into those offices, but rather the city is also moving forward with a new public safety annex. And the front part of that public safety annex will be utility billing with a walk-up window for ADA accessibility. And so that's going to open up this front area here. You already have finance offices on the other side of where community services is now, and so that will open up these offices for more of finance, who right now have desks that are virtually touching each other. So it will get them out of each other's space, and it will open up this area here for the Administrative Services Department, which of course is led by Stephanie Lucas and Capital Trust Agency. So they will be there, they'll have their own space, but as it relates to CTA bond matters that come in front of the council, it makes it that much easier for Dennis to be accessible to you and to the public. Part of that job position is also to be a financial advisor to the city. So working more closely, with Dennis as we talk about different debt instruments, I think would also be advantageous. But for the Community Services Department, the mutual benefit there is that department, including Craig Chamberlain, you saw earlier, is comprised of our volunteer firefighters who are actually officers in our fire department. And so it increases the response time that they will be right there at the fire department. So that is the reason for that recommendation. I'm going to skip to the last two, which is to review and amend policies, procedures, and bylaws. What we have had in place certainly meets with the Florida statute. In fact, we get a judge's opinion every time we have new bond validations. But it is just good, business to review those policies, because certainly there's modernizations, there's efficiencies, and there's going to be recommendations that Dennis makes, and I've heard of ideas coming from the board of ways that they would like to perhaps update those policies. So that needs to be done. It has not been done in 20 years. And then also Dennis already is working to update the website, emails, marketing, and other reporting to help the public's understanding of the business of CTA and GBFS. And so my last recommendation is that the city appoint Dennis as the CTA Executive Director to the vacant position from the retirement of Mr. Ed Gray. As we know, Ed has mentored, I'm going to use that word, I think it's appropriate. He has mentored Dennis for years and has expressed that Dennis is ready, and he made the recommendation prior to this budget year that Dennis be moved into the assistant director position. He had reminded me several times that he was not going to be here forever and he would like to retire. And the CTA board has expressed support of Dennis repeatedly. And so talking also with Mary Jane and with CTA's legal counsel and with our bond counsel, we feel that that most certainly is in keeping with the city's history of succession planning, and we're very pleased that that Dennis, as we feel, is just an absolutely great fit. So in doing so, the second part of that recommendation, though, is that the city council consider not engaging Dennis as executive director by contract. And a lot of the discussions in the state report relate to either vagueness or ambiguities in a contract arrangement for that position, because the other employees of CTA and GBFS are just hired like all other employees, which means that they have a salary range and the chain of command is very clear, and also who does those evaluations. And so I think this is an opportunity to do the same with the executive director. Currently, Dennis is an employee of the city. He's not contract. And so it doesn't require any action of your part, because it is already in the schedule of authorized positions. But if you don't like that plan, then what you would do is just provide some guidance to Mary Jane and tell her you would like to draft a contract and you would like to move forward with that type of arrangement for the executive director. Instead, if you support my recommendation, then what I would do is move forward with an interim appointment of Dennis in that position, and it would be no different than any other employee where he would be on a probationary status. Ultimately, we would advertise for that position within the next 6 months, as we do for all positions. But obviously, Dennis is going to have that time and experience, and he'll know if it's a good fit for him, just as we will as well. So that would be my recommendation there. And with that, I'd like to hear your thoughts and take any questions that you have.
All right. Leslie, do we have any public
Is there anyone online who would like to comment on this item?
Can y'all speak up there? I'm sorry. Can't hear you.
Really?
I do not.
Okay. All right. Is this louder for you here?
Louder, but
Okay. All right. I'll speak louder than that. Okay. So we don't have any public opinion on that. So do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second discussion on the changes that Samantha has discussed as far as CTA.
I have a question. Since Dennis will be considered as an employee of the city, is that correct?
Yes.
So he would fall under whose authority?
So he will be my direct report, similar to department heads, but let me also say, Ed Gray was an employee of the city. He was a contract employee, which meant that he served at the will and pleasure of the mayor and council, the same as myself and Mary Jane. So you had 3 direct contract employees, as it were. And so what this would be moving to is still an employee, but falls underneath my chain of command. And what I shared with the CTA board of directors is, that might not be the safest thing for the city manager to do. That's a robust job description. But I make that recommendation not based on my own self-interest, but what is in the best interest of the city and the mayor and council. So it gives you greater accountability. And one of the things that I note in my memo is that in the past that position had not been evaluated. And so I think part of that is because there was a question about who that position reported to. Was it the city manager, who is the administrator of all contract, or was it the, mayor and council? So if you do want to opt for a contract arrangement, I would suggest in either situation that you do address, who that position actually reports to.
Could it also be as an employee, as you that you're presenting here, but include the council as well as the city manager that he reports to?
Well, in what respect? For
hiring and firing?
So, by our charter, the council would not be able to hire and fire. On a day-to-day practical basis, Dennis reports to the CTA Board of Directors. So they are the ones for expenses, it is the city manager and Board of Directors already. Dennis is accountable to his board. The CTA is a nonprofit that has been created by the mayor and council. So, that was one of the, challenges with the contract, is that you do want that separation between the nonprofit and yourself, but yet by that contract, that position was answering to the mayor and council. And so that was a lot of the questions about accountability that came up during the operations report. By taking this, it definitely it clarifies that, but it also removes you from being the one that position is accountable to. It rested on the city manager and also the CTA Board of Directors.
Well, to me, this is a lot being thrown at us tonight. Moving the building, moving everybody. I personally would like to talk to some of the CTA directors to get their input on what they feel like. I mean, we've relied on these volunteers, and there are a lot of great businessmen in the city. I'd like to speak with them before making a decision on this, to get their feedback on what they think is best. You know what I mean? They're not here to say or anything, and I personally, that's what I would like to do before I make, vote on this to do it this way.
Didn't they provide you feedback?
Yes, but what I hear Councilman Schluter saying is that they did. We talked about this at a specially held board meeting. Of course, we didn't just talk about this once. And so prior conversations, from the board go back probably 2 years. Don't you love people talking about you, Dennis, like you're not in the room? And I have no sympathy because I have to go through this process, so I don't. But the CTA board in the past have talked to me about adjusting Dennis's salary to make sure that he didn't leave the CTA, that he would be part of that succession plan, because Mr. Gray was investing so much, time and training. And of course, Dennis was hired as the budget analyst, and then at the recommendation of the board was promoted to senior analyst. And then of course, most recently, Ed had recommended that his position be changed to assistant director. It was not done during the time of budget because, I thought we were wrestling with a lot during budget, and honestly thought that we had more time. So I have shared that with the CTA, and they've chuckled and laughed about that. And of course, you have your Mayor Pro Tem, Tom Nail, who is your appointee to the CTA board. And so maybe Mayor Pro Tem Nail would like to talk a little bit more about the conversations at the last board meeting and expressions made.
Well, as the council representative to CTA over the last few years, I of course had the opportunity to observe Dennis and the respect he has built around his position there. I was at the last meeting with the board, generally discussed it. Every board member spoke up, was fully supportive of this move, and I think I could speak for the board and say it's generally approved that this happens. He's mature beyond his baby-faced years, and so he's doing a great job, and fully support the board.
Tell me about the other points that we're talking about, or any issues.
As far as moving the office and all that, there was no other issues with any of that? They were all okay, or was that brought up?
It was brought up, and I think the generally the board considers that's basically an internal move. I think all of us support, as a part of the audit, support moving that office into the building here and taking it out of the remote, the little house behind the police station type thing. Wonder what they do in there. And I think very much approve of moving that here to this building, making it a much more part of the city staff and city organization than it appears to be at this point.
And to that particular point, that is not going to happen anytime soon. There's IT and technology issues with that, and of course, we first have to build a public safety building and relocate utility billing. And so, I mean, we have, on the optimistic side, we have many months. But we can bring that back to you as your own agenda item, if you like. I mean, just for y'all to consider that issue before we pull the trigger on that, because it is so many months down the road. But, you know, I did want to kind of bring y'all, you know, what I'm thinking administratively and get, you know, your initial reaction. And if on some of these, such as that one, and even maybe the biannual public workshops, if you want those to become action items before we do anything further, we can do that.
So basically, police stations have to be built first, is what you're
Yes.
saying.
And then everybody relocated, and Ed Miller has to make sure that the technology part is really a whole other component that has to happen as well. We're building the new police department. So yes.
Okay, so I guess where we are then, JD, with,
I have time to meet with them.
okay, and it was the one area that you have
Right.
concerns about. Todd, Tom, you sounded like you're good. Have you heard discussions, Randy?
Yeah, I was just concerned that we would be able to still have a say in the hiring and the position itself, as opposed to one person being all sole control of that. That each individual have a voice in that, as was in the past. But she's saying that has to be contracted that way. I'm not. I like the idea of putting money in payroll, regular employee. I just thought that we would still be able to have a voice in that decision in the future. You know, not whether, you know, not put all the burden on Sam.
If I could just explain, I think that, and just to kind of reiterate what Sam said, and just to make sure that everyone, we're all on the same page, when a position is in the schedule of authorized positions, it then becomes a position that is a direct report to the city manager, and the city manager in her administrative role administers that position as an employee of the city. The alternatives are, you know, the two few ones that are, you know, the city attorney and city manager, who are under contract directly to the council. And again, this is sort of in keeping with how our charter is established, and I would say in the council manager form of government that we have, even in discussions with our charter review committee, when it was going, and I imagine we'll have more of those, but this is in keeping with that kind of form of a government where you only have maybe a couple of unique positions or
Gotcha.
upper level positions that would be the direct reports to the council. So again, that I think is why the recommendation to put this now under the schedule of authorized positions and eliminate the ambiguities and some of the questions that were raised in the audit about why is this position different.
This was consistent with the direction from the state audit too, right?
It was, and it has helped me as I've learned more about the history of the creation of CTA and GBFS. It's helped me to think of it more as a port authority or an economic development agency, which is really what it is. I mean, it's an economic development agency. So it's its own nonprofit, but when you see the executive director of a port or economic development agency, typically that it folds, underneath that city management structure. But on a day-to-day basis, it's going to be you talking to your CTA executive director, who is accountable to his board. So really, if if his board is having issues, I would hear about it. That would be considered in his evaluation. I know it is a drastic change from, yes,
And who does the evaluation?
it would be me. Yeah, the same as the department heads. And of course, there's not ever been an evaluation in the past, so,
I saw that.
yeah. So we'll all be clear on who that is.
I think one thing, to, I guess, putting it under our city manager and the evaluation is, I would feel like I probably didn't have a good day-to-day idea of how somebody was doing. You know, where she would have reports, I'm assuming, regularly, and they have their staff meetings, and she sees budget, you know, all of those things that normally we would not be involved with and haven't been in the past. And so I feel more comfortable, I think, actually, with somebody having the position and is watching out for that, just as the rest of the departments and that we have under our control as a city.
It minimizes the probability of the position becoming political versus the other. And I understand what you're saying, and I know that's not where you're going, but it does. I've seen other municipalities and governmental units where those kind of positions become a real political football. And it just helps with that.
And you know, I'm just thinking aloud, Councilman, but with the evaluation forms that we have, because this is a unique position, we can revise that evaluation to require the input of the CTA board, which I think would give you some, you know, some added input from your appointees. That was, a conversation we had with the CTA board. They have not ever hired and fired, and so we had the discussion with them of how they are constructed, and I think that they would welcome that opportunity to be involved in that process. So that might be something that you want to consider, and we can revise the evaluation to include their input.
I think that's reasonable.
That's fine.
We're definitely making this up as we go. It's new.
That's fine.
Yeah.
All right, so then do we want to approve it
I have a
as,
motion in a second.
Yeah.
okay,
There's a motion
all right,
and a
so,
Vote on that.
Yeah, we'll have to vote on that first.
okay, all right, so, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, passes 5-0. And then Samantha, you will follow up on the other, Randy, does that satisfy you at this point, or do you
Yes.
want her to?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so then you'll just,
Okay.
and then, I guess in the writing of it, just either write postponement of the relocation, or however you want to do it.
Okay.
So
And I'll.
then that way,
I'll-
actually, yeah, I'll just leave it out right now.
Okay.
Okay, does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
And are we doing a motion on the second recommendation with the schedule of authorized positions?
That's the one we just voted
With
on, the
us.
resolution.
Yeah, I think just for clarity, the motion, really the action item was Resolution 68, 2020, which is the resolution to revise the schedule of authorized positions. And I think, so that's what you just voted on. And then you've also given direction to the city manager on the other items.
All right, thank you. Okay, next we will move down to consent agenda
You're good?
items. And we have A through E on those. Councilman, is there anyone who would like to have any item removed from this consent agenda? Yes,
Item C,
okay.
if you could, for discussion.
All right, any other item that any council member would like to remove? All right, do we have a motion on items A, B, D, and E? And that's the approval of memorandum of agreement for temporary debris management site location. And B would be disaster procurements, approval of services agreement with Eco Gardens Landscaping for emergency debris response. D, disaster procurements, confirmatory approval of agreement with Thompson Consulting Services for debris monitoring, and E was disaster procurements, confirmatory approval of addendum DRC for debris removal. Leslie, do we have any public comments?
No, you have not received any.
All right, anyone from the public here? All right, council, do we have a motion?
Move for approval, consent items Alpha, Bravo, Delta, and Echo.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any council discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. All right, vote passes 5-0. And then disaster procurements, the approval of task orders with Dewberry. Randy, you had a question about that?
Yeah, man, I read through most of these and they seem pretty explanatory, but when I got to that one, when it relates to damages that the wastewater treatment plant and water treatment plant for a approval task order from Dewberry to do the assessments, I would just, it's $14,200 for one and $15,500 for the other. Is that not something we could do in-house?
I don't know.
That was my question.
Yes, you certainly could, but we're seeking FEMA reimbursement. And so for the federal reimbursement, they require I won't say that they require. It becomes much more challenging if you don't have the independent third party conduct the damage assessment. And I will tell you that by late this afternoon, the damage assessment has been complete. I have seen some pictures and things that I would have thought were, I'll just say, for instance, some things I would think as a layman would be from this particular storm, they have found were from just storms in the past. And so it is that kind of check that FEMA looks for. It's kind of similar to the debris monitors who are out there measuring in order for us to seek reimbursement for our debris removal. So could we do it? Yes, we can. But in addition to seeking the federal reimbursement, it is very advantageous as we move forward with our after-action report, which will ultimately go to the city council, because you won't just have one account of perhaps, where we had deficiencies or, mechanical failures. That won't just be coming from your staff, but there'll also be that unbiased review. So it certainly would save money, but at the end, we could risk not receiving reimbursement.
Okay.
It's a good question.
Yeah, well, I did see that in some of the other ones. I didn't see it in that one, so that's why.
It's under project description. It is to the end product will be the letter and documentation for purposes of reimbursement for the federal declared disaster.
Hopefully we'll get that.
Yes.
Otherwise it's out of our pocket.
Well, we have been approved for public assistance, so we do expect to get 75% reimbursement.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
A second? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. All right. Okay, now we are moving on to the action items. And action item A is approval of report and recommendation by Goodwin Mills and Kaywood Incorporated and fiscal year 2020 Group A resurfacing project. Samantha?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm going to ask Scott Hutchinson, engineer with Goodwin Mills and Kaywood, to join us. Scott has prepared much of the report that is in front of you. And this, of course, is due to some challenges that we had with our resurfacing plan and Group A. And so I'm going to just skip to the recommendation before I turn it over to Scott. But staff's recommendation is that the council accept the report by Goodwin Mills and Kaywood. Of course, you have engaged them for this purpose for Group A paving project, and approve the recommendation for widening the roadways to 20 feet on High Point Drive, Madrid Avenue, and Cordova Street, and that the City Council authorize staff to conduct a public campaign to solicit resident consensus on this issue before implementing the design. So as you can see, these streets are pretty narrow, and so for safety, you see the recommendation here, but we wanted to walk through that with you, and then also we recognize that we would need to have considerable discussion with the residents as to why it would be necessary. So with that, I'll turn it over to Scott.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Scott Hutchinson with Goodwin Mills and Kaywood, GMC, and we were
fortunate to get this project from the city, and we appreciate it. Two main parts to it. One is to develop a set of plans for the resurfacing of these three streets, High Point, Madrid, and Cordova. And the second was to do an evaluation of primarily speed, but also the real official roadway evaluation. And there's criteria that we have to look at, and we're tasked with making recommendations, even though they may not be that popular. We have to point out things that don't meet current standards. Primarily here, you'll see in the report is your road width, and we typically shoot for, and the standard is a 24-foot asphalt width, pavement width. Now, what you have out there is far less than that, anywhere from 16 to 21 feet, depending on where you are, on what road you're on. And so we kind of backed up and we looked at maybe, let's look at the 20-foot width, which is the standard IFC code for fire trucks. That's what we consider a minimum, would be a 20-foot width. And so we made several recommendations, and we can adjust the plans however the council directs us to do. We could go the full 24 width. That would require a considerable amount of removing obstructions, trees, mailboxes, all kind of stuff out there. If you jump down to the 20 feet, you still have to remove some things, and you still would need to meet the 4-foot clear zone, we'll call it, outside that edge of pavement. But it is some obstruction removals, some trees, not just tree trimming, but some actual trees. Mailboxes we would have to remove and replace or reset. There's several retaining wall structures, things like that all over in the area. In addition to recommendations on signage, you have 2 of the 3 streets are set at 15 miles per hour, which is fine. They meet that. One, Cordova, does not even meet that. It really needs to be either widened, like we're recommending. You could probably still keep it at 15, or if you choose not to widen it, you at least need to knock that down to 10 miles per hour. Which is, if you ride through there, you'll see. If you try to go 15, it's hard to do. And especially with you'll see the report gets really detailed engineering wise with some terms that kind of geeks out a little bit, but it points out to comfort for drivers and what they consider these you see the word shy in there. You'll be driving down a highway and there may be a cow 100 feet off the roadway. You don't pay attention to it, you just keep on going. But if the cow's a certain distance off the edge of the pavement or anything, you're going to slow down and it's going to change your driving pattern. Well, that exists all throughout there, and that's what kind of drives the speed limit here. Is you have these things right on the edge of the road that make you veer, and there's just not enough room for 2 cars to be doing that at the same time and meet. So I've said a lot, but if you have any questions, I'll try to answer those. But you see our recommendations in there, and we will adjust the plans however the council sees fit.
All right, Leslie, any public comment, questions?
No, I'm not receiving
All right, so then is your recommendation basically to go with the 20 feet for it? I think I remember seeing that.
Well, the overall recommendation would ideally be go to 24 feet, and but that we understand how that would be accepted or not accepted out there in the neighborhood, because that's a considerable amount of addition. So that being considered, we would say 20 feet would certainly bring you to an acceptable situation, considering the IFC, and that would be, I guess, what we would recommend, and that's what the additional cost estimate we submitted considers doing. bringing it to 20 feet.
All right, and then Sam, I think in our description, it was we would, either meet with the neighbors living over there or in some way solicit their opinion.
Yes, if you accept the report and the recommendation as presented, the recommendation also includes that, mailboxes should be, for safety, 6 to 8 feet back from the edge of the pavement. So as the road is widened, there may be a need to relocate.
That's in inches.
I'm sorry, did I say feet?
Yes.
Lord, it's in somebody's living room. And you are going to
You'll
correct
be
me,
getting-
Councilman.
You'll be getting
Slow
some
down.
calls now.
It is usually Councilman Schluter's job to be like
I'm like,
feet, inches, no, somebody stop her. So, and so if you approve it this evening, then staff would make those contacts, yes.
Okay. All right, Leslie, any public comment?
They might not received any.
All right, council, do we have a motion? All right, do we have a second? All right, we have a motion and a second, discussion.
I would dare to say that having family and relatives that live on those streets, they would beg to argue with you on widening those roads that this is gonna make them go faster. They probably like them slowing down to get that cow out of the way or that, because those roads, there's some high-speed kids on those roads already, so I think we're gonna have a difficult time with that neighborhood unless we come up with some slowing, issues to slow people down on those roads, because I don't think they have a problem. Now, if you were going down there when all those oak trees in the past couple of weeks were on there, I would agree with you. It was pretty narrow there for a while, but, just living here all my life, that road is, what complaints I hear more from anybody on High Point and those roads is that people go too fast.
And I get that, and that's really not what we're trying to say.
I know that.
Is but I mean, excellent point.
You can say they go 10 to 15, but nobody's going 10 to 15.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what,
Sign
this,
says.
yeah.
I know what the sign says. I just been on that road a lot, so.
Yeah.
So I'm just putting
No,
that.
and
I think, I understand where you're going with this,
Yeah.
but I think it's gonna encourage more of what the neighbors are not wanting
Yeah.
when we start dealing with that.
If the neighbors don't want it, then what do we do?
We just, you're aware that it doesn't meet the minimum 20 feet wide, and we just resurface it and move on and at least add some speed limit signage, like Cordova, for example, it does not meet, even at 15 miles an hour, which is missing some signs, but at 15 miles an hour, it still does not meet that, so that needs to be dropped to 10. So,
That would be a lot cheaper.
Okay.
yeah, a lot, this is a considerable cost, obviously. We just don't want you to be unaware that it doesn't meet the ISC standards.
Yeah, no, that's fine, that's good information. And it maybe we can do something with our speed accommodations, like our speed things that we're putting other places, if we need to, if they do not want that. But definitely we will check with them and we'll see what, what the neighbors would like to do, and then go from there. All right, thank you.
Bump or
Thank
speed
you.
bump?
Huh?
Speed bump or speed bump?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Many of them.
Either, yes.
Thank you
Kinda
again.
like a roller coaster.
The moguls.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, so council then, so we've got the motion and the second to go ahead and proceed with this, and that is with the idea that we will check with the neighbors before making a decision as far as the width of the pavement. So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And,
Yeah, aye.
Are you in trouble, Jimmy?
I just wanna make sure I'm not
Yeah.
agreeing to this yet.
Okay, opposed?
I'm good, I'm all right.
Okay, all right. All, so passes 5-0 with no corrections. Next, we will go on to agenda item B, which is the approval of the change order for Soundside Force Main Aid and Construction, project. Samantha.
Thank you, council. A budget adjustment and change order is needed for this additional cost in order to finalize the budget. So I want to just point that out first. We had awarded the project, and then a project commenced with FDOT, and they came in and enhanced turning lanes and paved over a portion of the construction project with D.R. Horton. And so that meant that the project that they had bid out, there was an increase of cost that was unforeseen. It is in FDOT right-of-way, and so the developer has requested an additional $9,825.06. This is out of the SSRU budget, and so staff recommends approval by the council.
All right. Leslie, do we have any public comment? All right, okay, no public comment, do we have a motion?
So moved.
All right, second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, any discussion, questions from council? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. All right, passes 5-0. All right, next we'll go on to action item C, and that is approval of corporate changes related to CTA and GBFS. Samantha?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. These are administrative requirements with the retirement of Ed Gray. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'd really like to turn it over to the city attorney.
Okay, that's good.
And I'm gonna recommend that you vote on the GBFS and CTA matter separately, just so two motions. You are the board of GBFS, and so of course, but as the council, you also appoint, any officers or the registered agent, you determine that. Mr. Gray is listed on Secretary of State's website as an officer of both GBFS and of CTA. The council, sitting as the council, you also appoint the board of CTA, and an officer would be considered a member of the board. He hasn't ever really, Mr. Gray didn't ever really act as a member of the board. He wasn't a voting member, but again, he is listed as an officer. And so, just to ensure that it's council action that removes him, that we were asking for this vote, and also we would change the registered agent to be the current executive director for CTA and for GBFS, and then also the other subsidiary of CTA, which is CTA Community Development Enterprises, I think it is, but if I'm getting that right. Entity, yes, excuse me. I knew I didn't have that quite right. Thank you, Dennis. But in any event, that would give the authority for the attorneys. I'll do it for GBFS, and the CTA attorney will do it for CTA. So again, we've got two motions: one to approve the changes for GBFS, and then two to approve the changes for CTA.
And basically, these sound like just basically housekeeping items related to Chase.
Yes.
To his retirement, basically.
Correct.
Okay, so do we have a motion, first for the removal of Mr. Gray's officer in Capital Trust Agency?
So moved.
All right, a second?
Second.
Okay, any public, questions or discussion? Okay, any questions from council? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, that passes 5-0. Next, we'll vote on, removing his name from Gulf Breeze Financial Services. And again, any public comment? All right, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, passes 5-0. All right, so now, I think I'm missing.
Hmm.
I'm not missing. Okay, here we go. All right, now we are going to go to action item E, and that's the sale of 45+ acres of city-owned Tiger Point properties to San Jose County School Board. Oh, right, sorry. Back
Oh,
up.
the sunset, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay, sunset, my favorite, sunset or extension of face coverings by resolution, number 66-2020. And Samantha, do you have updated information for us?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Today I received an email from Mark Faulkner, CEO of Baptist, and also it was emailed to Councilman Torgerson. So to start off our conversation, I would like to turn it over to Councilman Torgerson to kind of recap those communications if I could.
Okay.
Yeah, I did place an email to Mark Faulkner, CEO of Baptist Healthcare, to ask him to give us a status on how he and his organization feels about this. Because we've seen a significant decrease in the count and decrease in hospitalizations. But his words were that it's still the recommendation of Baptist that we continue to follow the distancing guidelines, including wearing masks, avoiding crowds, and confined spaces and socially distancing where possible. Later today, he had a meeting with Sacred Heart Hospital, and their CEO affirmed the same position. And he does believe that the CEO of West Florida Hospital, who was not available today, but that feels that his position will be the same. So that is where our medical professionals are on this issue in the Pensacola area.
Additionally, we received an update from the Department of Health last week. We expect to receive another update from them in the next day or so, but our number of COVID cases are down to 5 within the city. And of course, that is down from a peak in July and early August of 30. And last week, in checking with our Baptist hospital here, which is not, it's not system-wide, but yes, at that time, they did not have any COVID patients.
All right, do we have any public comment or questions on that?
I don't see.
Okay. All right, anyone? All right, hearing none, do we have a motion?
I would move for approval of extending the face covering resolution.
Are you sure? You're the only one that has one, so I'm not.
Okay, we have a motion.
Yeah.
Do we have a second?
Of course.
All right, and we have a second. All right, council discussion?
Well, I think it goes back to what I've said the whole time. We get down to 0, and it's working. We need to keep wearing the mask. I just think that people are over it. I think they're over the whole thing. And I understand where Todd's coming from. I just don't agree we should continue making people wear masks. We got 5 cases in the city of Gulf Breeze. I think that we're still taking it too far. It's not a countywide thing. It's not Pensacola Beach. It's just the city of Pensacola. And it's just the city of Gulf Breeze that's saying that, and that really the stores aren't even mandated anymore. You have people, going, even the employees are not wearing them. So I just don't, I'm gonna vote no again tonight. And so
I agree. I think it's, we have less traffic now than more than ever. Vacation's over, you're not really seeing any people coming for that. I respect the people, if they wish to wear them, they can do so. If they don't feel comfortable in a facility that maybe people are not, they can remove themselves. But I don't think it should be a resolution to require it. Some of the outlets and vendors or businesses, they may require it. That would be up to them. Be like, still the same, no shirt, no shoes, no mask, no service. They can do that if they wish, or they don't have to. So. And I can respect their wishes if I go in and they ask to do that, as opposed to maybe one that may not. So I'm opposed to the mask as well.
Okay, all right, Tom?
My mind hasn't removed my mask on. No, I haven't changed my mind. I'm glad to see that report that Todd got today, because I'm wondering how that was coming out. But I still think it's a small price to pay, and my help can't hurt, so I would be in favor of extending another 2 weeks.
But it really wasn't a report, it was just an opinion from the, right, there was no report with it. It was just an opinion from the staff.
Report for you, opinion for
Okay.
you.
All right.
All right, and I think what I keep hearing, and, it's our same split, I think, is I still feel like we should go with the recommendations of CDC and our local medical community. And so I think we've all agreed, none of us like wearing a mask, but I do think that if it's going to protect others and possibly help protect ourselves, we should do it. So now we'll take a vote. All in favor of keeping the mask ordinance in place for 2 more weeks, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
No.
3-2. Okay, passes 3-2. All right, moving on to action item E. That is the sale of the 45 plus or minus acres of city-owned Tiger Point Golf Club property to the Santa Rosa School Board. And I believe our attorney is going to talk to us about that.
Thank you, Mayor. As I reported to you, I can't remember if it was the last meeting or a couple of meetings ago, but in one of our recent meetings, we had agreed to another extension on the time to close, and some of that was just as a result of the storm. We kind of, it derailed us, and that effort as many others, of course. And so we had hoped to be in a position to close as of October 6th, tomorrow. But once again, we are still in the position of working out some of the legal technicalities in order to be able to deliver to the school board an acceptable title and clean title report and commitment for title insurance. And we are just continuing to have to work through some things. Their attorney is being very cooperative, and is everyone's wanting to get to the same spot. It's just we're going to once again need another extension. You have already authorized the mayor to sign any documents necessary to get us to closing, so that extension would fall within that. But I've had asked to put this on the agenda as a possible action item in the event we did need for you to take some additional action to approve some mechanism of again reaching the status that we need to be in order to close. And it may be that I come back to you at some other point in the next meeting or the following meeting with some such action. Right now, again, though, I don't know what that is, and so we don't have an action item tonight other than just, if anyone has any issues or questions on another extension. And I think after speaking with the school board attorney this afternoon, my real estate partner and I, and he even suggested, why don't we extend it out into November? That also gives him time to take anything else that his board would have to approve back to them. And so, we will have it in place. We hope we're going to get there before mid-November, but right now, what we're thinking is it just makes sense to do an extension until November 13th. And so that is what we'll be preparing and asking the mayor to sign tomorrow. And again, I don't have any other action items, but did want to just report that that's where we are.
All right, so we don't need to take action on that?
Unless someone has, wants, if you disagree with that and want to pull back on your authorization for the mayor to sign what it takes to get to closing, we would have to entertain a motion on that. But if everyone's still agreed that we plow forward and make this happen, then I think we've already got that authorization. So.
Okay, so
How long
everybody.
have we been chasing this thing? 3
The-
years?
Yeah.
Three?
The whole process, yes,
This may
it's
be,
been a while.
but we're all those bits.
We've been almost there for quite some time, and I just, we're about to get a new superintendent, we're about to get 3 new board members. I don't know if they're in a position to back out of this if they wanted to, but I just think the amount of time it's taken us to do this is just totally unacceptable.
It unfortunately, there are things that are out of our control. The property has a long history, and for that reason, it has has a lot of legal issues tied up in it. And in order to close on a property in a commercial transaction like this, part of the agreement is to deliver, the title in a condition that they're willing to accept. And right now, the title companies are just, raising a lot of questions, and we're having to try to respond to and see if we can come to some agreements and resolutions. I'm hopeful that we can, and the school board attorney's hopeful that we can, and we're just having to continue to work through it.
And then we can close before that.
If we
date,
do
just
get the
yes.
necessary, yes, if we get everything in place and get the issues resolved, you could close before then, yes.
All right. Okay, so that sounds fine. We are where we are with that.
So the title issues could be the same problem with any other buyer that we have in.
Absolutely,
So they
it
need to
could
get
be.
cleared up no matter what.
Yes,
Just
they
because
could.
of the length of time.
It's not, yes, it is, it all relates again to the history of the property
Yes,
and its
right,
original
that's how it should
development
be.
as a golf course. And now, this sale is for it to be something else, so.
And I just want to expound, because Mayor Pro Tem Nail has been involved in these conversations as much as Mayor Fitch has from the beginning, but Mary Jane, I don't think and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but they're not referring to the end of the process, but the process itself of 3 years. Initially, we received interest from developers that was totally unsolicited to buy this portion of the golf course, and because that made the paper, the school then came forward and said, if you would consider this, we actually would be interested. So the city took the property off the market in order to give the school the due diligence that they needed. And it was, more than 6 months before the school came back and even presented a first offer. And so through those negotiations and making sure it made sense to our ratepayers and that the effluent disposal was recaptured, then we went into the long process of drafting the effluent disposal agreement that you've crafted for us, Mary Jane. So there is this very long process to get to here, and I just, for the sake of the public who are here, we're not talking about a title company holding up the process at the end.
Right.
It's just been rolling a rock uphill for 3 years.
It's just stages, and we
Yes.
are in that last stage of, getting to closing, which we've been in since, I guess, mid-August, and it's just again taking time because of the number of issues that we have to go through.
So
It's
let's hope the cost
unfortunate.
to sell doesn't exceed the price that we get.
Touche.
Can't say you did it profit motivated. You cannot say that.
Okay, so, with that, then we don't need to do anything. We just have new information, and she's still working on it, and we are getting close to the end.
Unless you want to rescind the authorization to move forward, but my understanding is you do want to move forward, we do want to get there, so.
I don't see how it can go any other way.
Okay, all right, so, next we will go on to discussion items, and that is the status update of our alternative means of transportation between Gulf Breeze and Pensacola.
Thank you. I'm going to ask John Loftus to join us from Loftus Marine, who is going to walk us through the project. But first, I'd like to just kind of recap and frame up for you the discussions regarding ferry service. In addition to ferry service, you also have the bus route from ECAT. And so there are a lot of moving parts. It is not a recommendation in front of you this evening because we're not complete with our analysis. And so I just want to say that up front. There are still unknowns and moving parts, but it is at a point where, just as in the prior discussion items on the agenda this evening, we need to hear from you some general agreement in the direction, or hear from you, time to pull the plug. Yeah, either one of those options. So. But as a matter of, background, what brought us here very obviously is the fact that we now don't have a functional bridge. Just a reminder that the trip from Gulf Breeze Hospital to downtown Pensacola prior to Hurricane Sally was 15 minutes for 6.6 miles. The same two destination points now take 65 minutes and 35 miles. For our daily commuters, they now face a minimum of 1.5 hours of travel. Of course, we know that we are averaging a major traffic accident about every other day. on Garcon Point, which is over 18,000 feet long of a 2-lane toll bridge. And so that has added additional traffic delays. There now the 57,000 vehicle trips per day that were on 98 are now being rerouted to Garcon Point. The average cost for that commute back and forth is $40 a day, and that may seem unbelievable, but that is in fact the cost when you look at 1.5 hours a day, and you look at the gasoline cost at 58 cents a mile. 30 times 35 miles multiplied by 2 trips per day, that's $40.60. That doesn't include the toll if the toll is raised. So there is a real economic burden as much as there is a quality of life. And then of course you have the disconnect that we talked about earlier with your CRA agenda, where it is completely stifling business in Gulf Breeze. And so effective today, ECAT service is now going from Pensacola Bay Center to Tiger Point Community Center. The bus route runs every hour and every half hour. There are Lyfts and Ubers that are available from those locations, or there's parking for carpooling available for kind of a park and share arrangement. There is a second leg that if the city proceeds with a ferry, ECAT is prepared to work with FHWA and FDOT for an extension that would take from Tiger Point Community Center those buses and then bring trolleys into the city. So we wouldn't have the same large buses, but for those who are using the trolley, it would be a full loop. And so they're not moving forward with that yet. That's waiting on city action, but that could potentially be available. So when looking at the potential for ferry service, the plan that I have to describe to you this evening is not ideal. It is certainly not what we would want to do as a city for providing ferry service, because it is not the most expeditious, and it is not the least burdensome on our residents. In the past, in 1989, when we had a similar disaster, we of course used Wayside Park. It would be faster, it would be least burdensome. We cannot use Wayside because, as we know, there's a construction easement with Skanska, and that construction easement states that the city can only have access during times of emergency. About 3 years ago, we found just such an emergency because we had a breach in our isthmus to Dead Man's Island, and we really had, a difference of opinion with Skanska, and we lost. And if it weren't for the Port Authority helping us with the barge that had the rock to make that repair, we were having to look at driving all the way around and it just was incredible. But I share that with you to say that we were not surprised when Skanska in this instance said, no, we absolutely, that would impact our ability to stage and repair the bridge. And so we then looked at the Bay Bridge bar or the bridge bar. And the problems there is that for FHWA funding, it requires ADA compliance and it requires ownership. And so our goal is to provide a safe, reliable commuter ferry service at low to no cost to our commuters. That's key to having a lot of ridership, is making sure that there is low to no cost at all. So because we've, as a council, you've just recently talked about the parking constraints there, but also the inability to make it ADA accessible, then that was out. That brought us to Shoreline Park South. Again, not an ideal option. And so the plan that I've presented to you in your packet, which includes the parking plan that Ron Pooley and his staff have put together, I really think it was excellent. I have to just brag for a minute on staff because they really thought out of the box. We provided it to Escambia County and presented it to FDOT, FHWA, City of Pensacola, our Naval Live Oaks, and ECAT were all there. And what it shows, Leslie, if you'll keep going to there's a map of our parking plan on page 199 of the agenda packet. It shows that there are zones for parking.
I pulled up the picture separately, so.
That's okay. That's okay. It's a 199 in your packet, and I'm going to be brief, but again, I'm just framing up page 199 of your packet. Yeah, this one. I think it would be difficult to talk about a pier if we don't first talk about our capacity issue and how we could accommodate people who might use the pier for ferry service. And so, in this parking plan, again, that Ron and his staff have developed, there's an interactive map. This is done in diamond mapping, so we could put it out to the public, but you see that Zone A, there would, it would accommodate 26 ADA parking spaces, and the way that we already have the pavilion set up and the restroom, it would allow for those who are disembarking from the ferry to come down the pier and exit, and then we would open the gate from a pavilion, and then you would have those who are coming onto the pier. And so that part already moves very fluidly. You see the Zone B and the Zone D. In Zone C, that would be an area where we would allow for some overnight parking if required. But you also see around the community center that we leave parking that would stay available, so that we would make sure those who are, yes, like, you know, GBSA and our tennis players, there would still be some parking there. Additionally, our churches have stepped forward, and First Baptist and Methodist, United Methodist, have both said that they would be willing partners to accommodate satellite parking. And so Naval Live Oaks has offered people movers, so that if we wanted to relocate people from satellite parking and impact Zone A even less, we would be able to do that. So I'm not going to go through the entire parking plan that you see on the pages prior, page 196 and 197, but with our existing staff, we are prepared to put together a well-coordinated parking plan to make sure that, you know, people are moving along, talking with walkie-talkies. When one area fills, then we go to the next area, and all told, the available parking would be just under 1,200 parking spaces with 26. So that's the capacity issue, and that doesn't. I'm sorry. Yeah. So that's the capacity issue that we address. Then we come to the pier itself, and of course we have storm damage presently. I also in the report talk about the boat ramp. We recognize that in Gulf Breeze, our boat ramp is it's very important for deeper water boats, and it's important for our own community. We're the only party at the table who is giving up something for ferry service, and that means that our waterfront park is going to be negatively impacted, and we're pushing traffic into our city. So by working with ECAT, working with trolleys, you know, having a well-coordinated parking plan, we're trying to have the impact of that parking be as minimal as possible. But the boat ramp, the goal is to keep it open on the weekend and provide ferry service during the workday so that our employees can most expeditiously get to work. And I have a breakdown again in the memo of the fact that inside the city of Gulf Breeze, for our 2,600 rooftops, we have about 1,200 rooftops who work in Pensacola. When you go outside of that and you include the Tiger Point area, that increases by 300%. When you include Pensacola Beach, of course, that number grows even more exponentially. So when we look at the ferry service, it's also important to keep the boat ramp open. The idea is ferry service Monday through Friday, 3 ferries, passenger ride of 149 per ferry. It requires a 8-foot draft. In addition to keeping the boat ramp open on the weekends, our hope is that we would also be able to keep it open on weekdays, but it may not be a full opening. So we may need to limit the hours of operation, or we may need to look at during the week, the ramp being open only to city residents, and on the weekend, it be open to the general public. So that's something for the council to consider in the future. We are not taking full action on that, but understand that the goal is to have the boat ramp open to the general public on the weekend and in a limited capacity perhaps during the week when we also have the ferry traffic. So I know that's a brief recap, but I'd really like to turn it over to John, who's done a lot of work. I mean, just immediately after the storm, knowing that this was such an emergency issue for our economy. And I'd like for him to then walk you through the cost of both those immediate repairs and then also with the extension of the pier itself. And the last thing that I'll I just want to leave you with as you're thinking through the issue with John is that if you find a extended pier is an amenity to the city of Gulf Breeze, then my recommendation to you would be now is the time. Because you have state and federal agencies who are right now willing to work with us on emergency permitting that typically would take many years. And so that is just something to consider while all parties are at the table. So John?
Thank you. Appreciate you having me here tonight. I have to investigate this project from regulatory, from environmental, and from ADA, as well as suitability. And so the first step was immediately I go, okay, well, do we have grass beds out there? And I have to get past the grass beds. So first I have to go 100 feet just to get past the grass beds. Then I go, well, what kind of water depth do I need and how far out do I have to get adequate water depth for the ferry? And I have to determine times a year and times a day on the tides for so. That put me out another 100 feet in order to accommodate what I think would make the ferry service work for you and be a suitable solution. Then I have to look at the existing structure and I have to say, okay, what does this existing structure need in order to be safe and sound and have structural integrity, knowing the kind of foot traffic that's going to go back and forth. So we investigated the on-land portion all the way from the parking lot out, all the way to the end of your existing dock for that portion, and came up with a repair cost and piling replacement plan and so forth in order to make that part work. Then we came up with a 200-foot add extension. Then at the end, I have my ADA requirements I gotta work through. And to come from a fixed structure to a floating structure is a little difficult with ADA. So you have to then pick a middle point and then have an aluminum gangway that can go up and then go down, but for the most part never exceed your slope requirement for the wheelchair service to be able to access from the floating dock to the fixed dock. And that's the plan we came up with, very similar to the plan of the quiet water ferry service that we did, ferry dock that we built out on Pensacola Beach. We put some photos in to show you a similar plan. That ferry on Pensacola Beach loads from the side. We would be loading from, I think, the bow on this plan. So there's some slight construction changes, but for the most part, that's what you'll see. The regulatory side of it is I have to jump through some hoops through the Department of Environmental Protection and through the Army Corps of Engineers first. And the Department of Environmental Protection is on board to help us facilitate an emergency permit for the most part right away, with some very serious scientific narratives that we have to come up with in order to tell the story of why it's an emergency. And in my mind, it's a one-liner. So I think they're on board and I think they get that. The Army Corps of Engineers, a little tougher to work through, but I feel like we will work with them and I think that they will come on board and they will issue us what we need as well. It may take just a little longer for the Army Corps, but I think we're going to be good. So I have to make that work for your emergency part in order to do the repairs and to do the extension. Once they give us the emergency order, we can begin construction on the repairs and the new construction. We then have to come back and do some serious administration, drawing, survey, and lease work to follow up with what we're doing and make it clear that on paper we do meet all the requirements. There's going to be a lot of discussions back and forth so that we know we meet the requirements verbally and some rough sketch, shop drawing kind of stuff, but then follow up with all of the formalities of it. And that's going to take some time, but in the meantime we will be building the structure and moving forward the vision that you see on paper. And that's it as far as costs go. I think the overall budget is $455,000 with $100,000 in cost for the repair portion, and then the remainder be the extension part, the floating dock, the gangway, and all of the mooring poles necessary for the ferry to pull in and tie off temporarily, ongoing, back and forth. Our water depths out at the end are about 11.5 to 12 feet. That is suitable for the ferry. That helps us in the middle of winter to still be able to run a ferry service and have the depths we need, knowing that every now and then there could be a hard push for a real cold winter's day. I will tell you, in studying this location, in knowing the hurdles, this is a better place for the winter time in the north winds that are going to be blowing hard coming from the Pensacola side. You won't see those winds on this side like you would if you were on the other side going through the winter. So I would say from the standpoint of a boat pulling up to a dock and trying to get people on and off, this is not a bad location. And other than that, I'm here for any questions.
What length of time, if you, from the day that you start, you know, if we go this direction, how long would it take to complete that and get the service ready to go?
The repairs for the existing structure is a 2-week time frame.
Okay.
The ferry dock itself has some variables, and some of that is the access to materials. We're running into problems with materials being immediately accessible and ready to go. I can tell you that we would do everything we can to have it done in a 4 to 6 week period, just depending, but we really need to get a handle on the material portion. And we would do that immediately. If somebody said go, I would have all those answers within a day or two and give you a better answer.
Okay.
Would this be like perforated? Is that what you're talking about on fluid dock, or would you do?
So I would match the existing dock structure for the approach going out. And then when you get to the floating dock and the waiting platform, I would make that perforated.
You would make that perforated?
Yes, sir. Because it's a larger area out at the end, and that's usually what you see take the most impact.
You know, the thing, I just don't, I don't see it. Personally, I don't see, you know, that many people using the ferry. I mean, me, I've driven it 4 or 5 times a day. I mean, not a day, but a week. You know, I do it almost every day of the week. And it takes me about 45 minutes to get to one of my stores from the Gulf Breeze store. Because I want my vehicle when I get over there. You know, I don't want to have to deal with no vehicle. I think it's a lot of money to spend on it. I think there's a lot of storms still coming, you know, as we get this thing built. There's no guarantee a storm can hit right when you're finishing it and take the whole thing out. I see it as big, uncovered, unprotected. I know my wife would walk out there and stand for 45 minutes waiting where it's raining and cold and get on a ferry waiting on other people to get on it. So I personally don't see it working. You know, when we did it in '89, when the thing done, it was more smaller, like the Entertainer and this and that, and people, you know, they were doctors and this and that that wanted to get downtown quick and didn't want to spend that much time, and they just kind of contracted themselves on a smaller level. I didn't see it as a city-wide level trying to fix the problem. And, you know, I'd rather see this money and energy and all go towards getting that bridge fixed quicker. I know that we don't have a lot to say in that, but I just think it's a lot of money and a lot of energy to spend on something that I personally don't see 135 people, 140 people to get on in a day.
So if I can talk to some of that, because I know it'd be difficult for John to, Pensacola and Gulf Breeze have put together a survey. And I honestly expected it to go live today, so I'm sure would be tomorrow. But that survey, the intention is to poll people and find out. There is going to be diminished returns, obviously the furthest that you get out. So for a ferry that's traveling 18 knots, of which these vessels, you know, travel 18 to 20 knots, it's a 16-minute trip from the end of our pier to Pensacola. You have to factor into that, of course, the actual drive time. And so by surveying, you know, people will get a better handle on that, but that comes into also, you know, the goal of having it be no cost and reaching out to FDOT that they procure the ferry service. So I really look at this as 2 different issues. One is the actual mode of transportation, which we've asked FDOT to consider. Sitting here today, you know, we don't know if FDOT is going to do that.
Right.
And so because there is such a delay for us, we don't have a pier ready to go. And so the question really is, is this an amenity, as you said, whether there's a ferry that ever docks there or not, is this an amenity for Gulf Breeze? Well, some bigger picture issues is that we applied for a NERDA grant, which is BP oil spill recovery money. And we right now are continuing to work with NERDA representatives on, you know, the details of that, expecting that this winter there's going to be an announcement. The challenge is that just there's an announcement, but there won't be the opportunity to draw down on those funds until mid-2021. Those funds are to further enhance this park for recreational fishing, and also Wayside Park and Woodland Park for the floating pier that the council has approved there. And so already the council is looking at improving the amenities here for recreational fishing. In my mind, there is so much that is still a variable for this council. It's very hard for you to make a decision on ferries. But as it relates to perhaps an opportunity to expand this pier, then what you're hearing from John is there's a $450,000 cost, of which $100,000 of that is likely, 75% of that is likely to be reimbursed from FEMA. So that's $75,000 right there because it's damage, right? And so, and if not FEMA, then perhaps your insurance carrier, but we're working through all that. Of the remaining of the $350,000, you receive about $275,000 in an average year in TDC funds, and you have a reserve there. Now, a portion of your TDC funds is used on pier and parks maintenance already. And so you would have to subtract out those hard costs that you have every year. But in a future conversation, if the council is looking at funding, what I would foresee is that, especially for something that would be used for your charter boats and more of your recreational needs, this could be something where the TDC pays it back, you know, over the course of 3 years. And that's money that, of course, is paid for by your hotels. It's not coming out of your millage in ad valorem. So those are just, for me, knowing that it's very challenging for the council to take action when there's variables on whether FDOT's going to contract on a ferry or anybody's going to use it. That's just too hard a task to undertake. But the question for staff, and I think for John, is do you want an extended pier? Do you want the opportunity to have more vessels use it? Is this an attraction to the boat and the pier, boat ramp and the pier you already have?
Sam, I guess my question, and I don't know that much about both side of it, but the longer pier, how will that, it seems like it's particularly this summer, we've had such a parking issue with boats and trailers, just, you know, who want to launch or pick up. Then would an extended pier enhance that in any way? I guess that's what.
Well, ironically, there have been a few times here lately where Ron Pulley has had a good chuckle. And the need for additional parking has been a theme that Ron has brought up for the last couple of years. And so Ron has identified opportunities for just with, you know, gravel, providing more overflow at Shoreline Park South. And so that's something that we brought up. It's never made it to the top of the priority list. But there are opportunities to increase the parking that we have. And I think, you know, you kind of test the waters, see what's needed, and then go from there.
But as far as being able to launch more boats, it
Yes.
wouldn't really affect that?
No,
Okay.
no.
No, if
More than
anything, it
one.
would entice more people who are doing commercial fishing to use that pier. You know, people who are doing 6-packs, 4-packs of boats, to be having customers meet them there as a business. It would, to me, that's what it's gonna bring. And that's not gonna bring us as taxpayers any more money, it's just gonna bring, you know, people using that and throwing fish carcasses and other stuff like that.
So the NERDA fishing grant for recreational fishing includes the grinder pumps, the outdoor kitchens, much more like, you know, a tourist recreational fishing experience there. And so that's part of that grant that we're expecting to hopefully hear positive news on, is to provide those grinders and provide the sinks. And it could provide an opportunity for, for small entrepreneurship for the businesses that we already have to have those satellite, kiosks down at the waterfront and to serve those people. That's a longer
So would
vision.
we charge them for them?
Well, I would imagine that, yes, the public would want to see a benefit off of that.
Well, you didn't play that part of it, you just said we could have them. But then it goes back to what Cherry's saying with the parking, and we already know that we're in dealing with an environmental area all around that boat launch already, as far as wetlands and everything, so I don't really see us getting a whole lot more parking for that, so.
One of the things that would do, if I can interject, is you have some congestion with all the boats coming in right now, waiting to use the ramp and get up on a boat trailer.
Right.
And one of the things that the pier and the extra length of pier would do, and with a little more planning and design that we could do real quick, is that you have a lot of pier now that boats can pull up to and wait until it's their turn to go through and pull into the boat ramp. And that, I think from the marine industry side of things, that's pretty important. And we see that day in and day out at other ramps, and it becomes a little bit of a cluster. Now, by doing this, you can solve the problem immediately with the transportation issue. You can also add to the enhancement of going forward after this transportation issue is over, having a place that's kind of a neat thing that maybe ferries keep on using and other boats use, and you solve the congestion problem of the boats waiting at the boat ramp.
And that sounds good, to me, but I see it as it's $500,000, and our taxpayers are looking at it, we're spending $500,000, and they see two ferries that were beached up in the parking lot, and they were never really utilized for Pensacola Beach. And I would dare to say that Robert Rinke and some of those people on both sides had this same argument. No, people are going to use it, and the ferries guy were going bankrupt because they had 3 people, 6 people on the boat all year long not using it. I just see it by the time you get permitting and you start building. I mean, they haven't even finished the Woodline, dock down there. They're still, coming down here and trying to use ours, and it probably got destroyed more. And you probably can tell us more than anything that one did. And it's been sitting unfinished all summer long. And so I just don't see us doing all this, spending all this energy and I understand that the long-term benefit of it, but I just think that as taxpayers, they see us as a city just going to throw away $500,000 build a pier. And my yard flooded. My street's still flooding. This is still doing this. We should have had. The guy on Washington Street was saying the generator stopped working and his yard started flooding as soon as that happened. There's stuff that people are going to sit back and they're going to point their finger at us that we're spending money we shouldn't be spending. It should be spent better. And that's just my opinion. This is kind of a crazy time to be looking at spending that kind of money on a pier. It's just my opinion.
I have a few questions.
Sure, go right ahead.
With the repairs that you talked about, John, first thanks for jumping on our job quickly.
Yes,
You've got a lot of
You're welcome.
them lined up out there right now. But with the repairs that you mentioned, does the 100,000, does that include the boat ramp repair, or is that a separate?
No, sir. That's unrelated.
Okay. The material for the basic dock, are you thinking about flow through, or is it just standard?
So there's a grading that's more commercial grade out that we used on the ferry dock. It's made of fiberglass I-beam type structure, handle foot traffic better and more weight better. So it's the same concept as through flow, but can still allow waves to go through it, but handles the weight and so forth.
The survival rate of those seem to be a lot higher.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Back to the winter time. Sure, there's going to be 8-foot drafts, pretty heavy duty boat.
Yes, sir. So you have 11.5 to 12 feet at high tide when we took the reading last week. You have a winter to summer 3-foot swing,
Yeah.
and you could even have a little higher on a day or two. So to tell you every single day, I can't tell you that. But to tell you that 95 to 97% of the days, I can tell you that. So.
All right. Sam, just to clarify this, because I hear what JD was saying on this, and one of my questions is going to be, could others use the dock, other charter boats, that kind of thing? And if so, could we do some type of permitting or fee for them that will generate revenue?
So, yes, that's a different conversation, but here's just been Samantha's line of thought. Obviously, that wouldn't be low to no cost, which is what we're trying to achieve with FDOT. And so I was hoping with the Bridge Bar, I have not personally laid eyes on their pier, but it does open up that business opportunity for them. We have had a lot of private, charter captains express to us that they would like to be involved in the ferry service. So even though it wasn't advantageous from the FHWA point of view, it could be very advantageous for the Bridge Bar. But if that's not the case, because I have not done that analysis, I don't know what the condition of that pier is. then yes, you absolutely could enter into separate MOUs, and Mary Jane and I spoke about that, getting some examples from the Island Authority, and you could move forward with that as well. Mhm.
Well, yeah, it would just seem to me that the real litmus test is gonna be the survey and whether you can make it lower in cost. Because I tend to agree if it's gonna be $20 or $10 or something like that, then you have the travel issues on both ends and whose car you're gonna take, all that kind of stuff. I don't know that it's gonna be
But,
huge.
I don't want to mislead the council in any way. To the best of our ability, staff have come together and provided you with a plan, but there are unknowns. And sitting here today, I'm discussing a pier with you more than the ferry service, because I don't know whether the ferry service will come to fruition. They're reviewing our request right now. Tomorrow, we could find out that they're gonna procure ferries, or tomorrow we could find out they're sticking with the buses. And so, if you wanted to move forward with this pier as an amenity, then what I would say is to utilize those TDC funds that can't be used, for stormwater, and to go to Councilman Schluter's point, we would do a good job of making the public aware why we would be using bed tax money that can't be used any other way. But if you're only interested in extending the pier for the ferry service, I would not feel comfortable this evening, because I can't guarantee you the ferry service yet.
Yeah, right.
But John, if there was a boat like the Entertainer or the Lively One or something like that, we wouldn't have to go out that far. If we just contracted it in a smaller, you know what I mean, where we just allowed people to run independent ferries off there, we wouldn't.
We would have to go out 100 feet just to reach out past the grass beds.
Oh, I see.
And then we would have to allow enough to be able to pull up to the dock still.
So what's the depth right now? Where is it at right now?
You're at a 6.5 to 7 foot right where you're at now.
And that's not with a good strong north wind blowing the water.
Correct. You'll drop from there. So you have to allow to get out past the grass beds. Then the DEP requires you to be so many feet off of the grass beds, and then you have to allow for the boat itself. So you might chop off 40, 50 feet,
Mm-hmm.
but you wouldn't chop off 200 feet.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I guess my only real other concern that we've talked about already is the boat ramp. And I would be less in favor of chopping off the parking spaces even during the week. Because you've got the capacity to haul people from the remote parking areas versus the boat trailers. There's not that many spots for the boat trailers. And this is, I think, the only suitable ramp really in a long distance, particularly now that the bridge is broken. So, I don't think when they fix the Woodlawn ramp, John, you may correct me, but I don't think it's suitable for deep water traffic boats or trailer boats or DVs and such.
No, your boat ramp is for the deep water.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be important to see what the survey shows, because I could even begin to pick a number of how many people I think will plan to take advantage of it. And to me, that one, and then looking at the timeline, but then also, I guess the answer is we didn't get ferries anyway. But, so maybe I guess just update us.
So if we wait on the survey in order to provide enough time for responses, you're talking several weeks out. And so what you're telling John is, the ferry services have said they can be up by the end of October. Pensacola has said they can be up in 2 weeks. John needs to work with our state and federal agencies, if we're going to be up the same time that the ferry would be, again, hypothetically available, should such a ferry materialize. Or you can, wait on the survey, but just know that really means that you're not giving John the green light until the end of the month.
The survey has to take that long?
Yeah.
No, but I don't have it in hand right now. So, let's say that in the next 48 hours it goes live. Typically you want to give, people, by the time you promote it and they know it's out there, I would think at a minimum 2 weeks
How will it be distributed?
through social media.
Okay.
And so the results, they'll be able to see it instantly, like, when you'll be able to see it pretty quickly.
A lot of
We'll
logistics
push
is
it
gonna
real
get
hard
looked at.
and have it ready for presentation at the next meeting. make that?
I'm sorry, have the survey ready for, yes,
Have the
which is
results of the survey.
in, which is in 2 weeks,
Results.
yes. I'm going to say yes, although I haven't seen the survey yet, but
I'd be
I-
willing to move forward with
Yes.
it, just that one.
okay.
Yeah,
So
I-
keep working, and what I hear you say is keep working through the permits, simultaneously do the survey, but we haven't pulled the trigger on any construction costs or else, okay. Other than the repair, clearly we all support the repair,
Right.
yes.
And then what about the repair of the launch part too?
That is ongoing right now, and so the goal is by Thursday, if not before, it will be open for boaters who are evacuating their boat. So it will only be one way on Thursday with people getting their boat out. And then, and I should say that Oriole Beach, John gave me an update this morning that they'll be doing emergency evacuation starting tomorrow morning. So hopefully that will help cut down on the traffic.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's good news.
Yeah.
Yeah, we called
Yeah.
the county this morning and had a meeting with them to see if we could go ahead and do that to alleviate some public social media pressure.
And there's no way until Thursday we can start letting, with the storm where it is, and start picking.
Dale Marine is out there today, and so Ron and I talking, Thursday is the announcement. I mean, you'd love to exceed
I just know
that.
a lot of people are really panicking with this storm, you know.
And we've heard from a lot of them. If we can exceed that, we definitely will have it open earlier. But the Thursday we're confident on right now. If we can do it at all earlier, we absolutely will. And then Saturday was, depending on weather, obviously, but that was when we were going to start doing our limited opening so that we could continue to do repairs, but allow, city residents at least to access the water. So that's where we are right now. We're shooting for Thursday, and we'll start noticing that, to the public tomorrow, and then if it ends up getting done earlier on Wednesday, we'll.
Put the word out.
Yep.
Just a note for anybody, the boat ramp at the river at 87 is open, and it's fairly deep. Somebody really needs to get the boat out.
Also, Archie Glover in Milton, right by Interstate.
Mm-hmm. That's some of the, is that the one you're talking
Oh,
about?
no, that's one south.
We also, when we put that word out, we expect Pensacola Beach residents, it will be open to the larger Gulf Breeze community to be able to get their boats out. And so part of that will just be timing, how we're coordinating, helping everyone get their boat out, so, yeah.
To share with people that
Yeah.
place on Pensacola Shipyard or place
Yeah.
like that, and that's when Paul drop them off.
Yeah, that's very good.
Have we heard any updates on the length of time for repair of the 3 Mile Bridge?
Yes. Mayor Fitch and I attended a meeting with FDOT Secretary Barfield and our FDOT District 3 Secretary, Senator Broxton, Representative Alex Andrade, and Mayor Grover Robinson, along with some DOT staff engineers. And they state that they have significantly completed their damage assessment and that they're looking at 6 weeks and 6 months.
I like 6 weeks.
No
No, here.
no consistency to my erroneous standards of measure. 6 months, and that started from Hurricane Sally, so that started from the 16th.
Okay,
6
so
months
that's
out.
6 months. And if, let's just say hypothetically, if we gave him the green light, 2 months
At best.
at
The
best.
materials.
That's gonna be in December. We're already in the worst part of the, beginning to get into the colder weather season and 200 feet to walk. And then my concern is that, 149 people, 150 people, and in the transportation, instead of 8 to 10 bikes on racks, it's not a whole lot of bikes, to be able to put 150 people. I don't know if that's misleading or not, but it's not a lot of transportation that people can bring once they get on the other side. So I just kind of wonder if that's going to even materialize as a good alternative for the cost that's going to be involved. I understand down the road for the pier would be nice, but I have concerns just like JB about storms taking it out. It's going to really stick out there. Maybe there's some other alternative that could help. It seemed like back in the 80s, it was just good old boys helping out. Just, hey, I got a boat, I'll pick you up and bring you. As opposed to now having to create all these hurdles to get over to get, EPA and DEP and then ADA ramps and all that, it's like, we're not trying to build a
That's a
Disney
big
park.
expense.
It just got really expensive, yeah. But I was just curious, what was the length of time? 6 months? That's more encouraging than a year, from what we were hearing at some point.
Well, notice I dropped a lot of names first so that you can quote them when you're describing the
I was wondering why you dropped all those names. I was saying, just give me the number.
Yeah, because I didn't want anybody to say Samantha said 6 months, so use any of those names.
Yeah, she did say it. I heard that too.
Okay. And you have 200 feet of ramp, you have people standing out in the weather.
Any
You're not gonna do it.
further discussion on the fair?
Okay,
Okay.
all right, thank you.
All
Thanks,
right, so, thank you very much, John. Thanks so
You're
much,
welcome.
because I think you were
Yeah, thanks,
on
John.
the
Thank
spot
you.
like the day after, so we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
We need the help.
Okay.
All right, now, any new business?
No.
Okay, now, for what, those of you who've been waiting, it is now time for public forum, and so we just ask that you, raise your hand, be recognized, and come up to the mic, and, state your name and address, and then, what you'd like to talk to us about. Come on up.
I just want to sit at the end of the table, because there's a microphone
good
right
idea.
there. And if I can just get your name and address.
Steve Lillo.
Okay, and we do have 3 minute limit, sorry.
I raised my hand first because we were just talking about this. There might be another spot behind the restaurant and the hotel for a 30-yard, it's deep water. You got a canal right there that goes into that. And the people that have homes up in there, it's really deep. You're about 30 yards out and you're in deep water. I can't speak for the bridge bar, but I'm sure having traffic back on the highway right there to stop and go from boat to car, getting through Gulf Breeze again, it wouldn't interfere with neighborhoods like Shoreline. Now that Skanska have all their workers in Pensacola, they're not coming over here, that can be cleaned off. You can get at least a couple hundred, 200 or 300 cars there, if not more.
I'm sorry, I did not get your name. and
Steve
address.
Lillo.
Okay, Lillo, did you get it?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
address?
I have the Italian restaurant with the hotel at the Quality, and I've taken over La Brisa's.
Okay,
So-
that's fine. All right, thank you.
Any questions?
I think that we had, that actually was one of the first places we thought of originally. And the challenge was, I don't think that it's in perfect condition right now either. I think.
No, the bridge, yeah, their marina's pretty wiped out. They have boats on top of it and everything.
Okay.
But behind the restaurant and the hotel, they own 600 foot of waterfront.
Okay.
And we're putting a pier there one day, but maybe we can help each other out, even financially, I don't know.
Okay. All
Just
right.
an idea.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for the
Thanks, Steve.
suggestion.
Everybody needs to go eat at his restaurant. It's excellent food.
Yes, it is.
That's right.
Okay, anyone else like to speak for a public forum?
This doesn't start my 3 minutes, I hope.
No, we'll wait till you get seated.
She getting old and
That
hurting.
length of time you had to wait, huh?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for recognizing me, Larry Cannon, 117 Shirley Drive.
All right, got it.
I would like to speak briefly about the flooding that happened 3 weeks ago. In the past, we had a tried and true method of dealing with the flooding that occurred. And of course, what happened 3 weeks ago was terrible. So I'm asking the city to, as in the past what worked, to put like a large pump on Shirley Drive, like a 400 gallon, like that supposedly I was told is on McClure now, and that they each have their own designated line, since it only has to go to somebody's driveway where the new storm drain is right inside the entrance to Plantation Hill, much shorter distance. So hopefully by hook or by crook, they can come up with the hose so they can have both pumps running at the same time, which probably would have saved quite a bit of suffering that currently took place in Shirley and McClure Stearns area, which is all I can speak about. So, and I'm asking for a new pump on Shirley because they put a 250 in there, and from the get-go, it's malfunctioned. They put it in turned it on a Tuesday. From 10:30 that night till 5:30 in the morning, I was out 5 times to turn that pump on in wind and water. And every day since then, it's been on. to try and bring down the water table, and it shuts off 2 or 3 times a day. Even today, the city came out and dug up the blue hose that's like utility buried, turned it on, 25 minutes later it turned off. And I left to come here at 5:03, it shut off again. It's probably off right now. So to give us the best chance of not flooding again, I'm asking that the city, you know, agree with me that, you know, something needs to be done in this order of putting the larger pumps on with each having a designated hose. Because I know we can do better. And if not, it's just with the water table as high as it is, it's gonna take a lot less rain to start the flooding again. And I know we can do better.
Okay. Samantha, I think, we've got the notes, and I certainly got gone up about this for comments, but definitely we'll take your suggestions, but we also know your concerns, and we know what's happened before, and get with the people, you know, who we have with the city, who tell us more about that, how they see it as a solution.
Yes, and I do want to share, I think from what you said, you might know this, Larry, but just before the meeting, I received an update from Sam Wilson, who verified that there will be the 6-inch on Shirley replacing the 4-inch. And so in addition to that, number one, you're right, we had mechanical failures, even though we put the pumps out on Sunday and Monday, and the direction was to test them, make sure that they were there. That is an area that is prone to flood. Obviously, we had mechanical failures, and that was one of the reasons for the damage assessment that was completed just today. So we pretty much left everything as it was in order to have that assessment completed. And everything that you're asking, I took a note, and so we understand, and it absolutely could have been done better and will improve. So we hear you.
So this time, will each pump be running at the same time and not shutting one off and running the other one, which?
Well, unfortunately, it wasn't intentional that happened last time. And so, and all of that will be in the after action report. You know, we're going to showcase our warts and all to make sure that we do learn and we're better every time. So the process in post-disaster recovery is always that damage assessment, which we have been conducting individually with staff. We also have an anonymous survey that we have put out to our employees, and we have, you know, the separate engineer report that we talked about earlier. All of that damage assessment goes into the after action report, which is short, but it breaks down from, you know, public safety to utilities, and that's my report back to the council. The council approved an emergency operations plan just a year ago in October 2019 that very much emphasized that Santa Rosa County is prone to flooding. And so that's part of the after action report to the council on here is the procedure, here is what deteriorated during the disaster, and here are some takeaway recommendations. The council will hear those and come up with goals. And so all of that's going to happen very shortly. They'll have that after action report. My goal is by the end of October, it will be complete. And so we're not here to say that we did everything perfect. There was the objective, and unfortunately we had several stormwater pumps that failed during the storm, and we know that. So part of that damage assessment is, you know, why did that happen? How could it be prevented? And we'll definitely be talking about that. So the goal is most definitely for both pumps to be working on McClure and Shirley. Bigger goal is to get you connected to the East District project very clearly. That's the big picture goal here. So we definitely hear you.
Well, I was told by the city that was the plan, to run one pump for 2 hours when they were out there Tuesday afternoon, and then shut it off and turn the other one on. I've been there long enough to know both of them should be on. I said, I'll do it. I won't go to bed. I'll run this pump. If it runs dry, I'll shut it off. But the pump was overwhelmed. I mean, the water was this deep when I went out last time.
And certainly there is a point at which I don't argue. In fact, Councilman Hebert and I talked for a long time, right before this meeting, we talked for over an hour about what the goals were and where we fell short. And so that's all part of that after action report. And so, you know, maybe some of staff aren't all on the same page as well, and we'll have that conversation. The city, prior to the storm, released a heat map that we put out on social media that said, if you're in these areas, you are vulnerable in a 100-year flood event. At that time, we weren't even, the storm hadn't come so far east for us to even know we were looking at 500 years. So we knew we were looking at perhaps 14 inches in 24 hours. And we, on Sunday, moved those pumps to those areas. So you have an issue on McClure and you have an issue on Shirley. It was not to alternate pumps. So, you know, Monday, you don't want to wait until 48 hours before the storm to test your equipment. You know, and so we had a breakdown of staff as it relates to the testing. We had some newer employees who reported up to the individuals who you're talking to that they tested the equipment. Well, it could have, I think that the test, one of the takeaways we'll have is having more thorough tests of our equipment. Because it did fail during the storm and we had to assess afterwards, you know, why that happened. So,
Okay.
yeah, we definitely acknowledge, as I said to Randy, we lost the game on game day. And it's hard for me to look at you square in the eyes, Larry, because I sent you a text and told you we weren't going to fail you before the storm. So there's the mechanical equipment, you know, next time I'll say, you know, equipment depending, but that's really tough because as you said in the past, it's always been an area prone to flood. And that is how we gave ourselves our report card, was how well we responded to that area. So there's going to be a lot of conversations about McClure and Shirley moving forward.
Can I ask a different subject just real quick? There's so much construction debris and yard debris in the street. I'm concerned about it blowing around and ripping the hoses. Is there any chance they're gonna pick anything up before Thursday?
So,
in case it does come?
Yes, the report from our debris is that the vegetation has pretty much, you've received a first pass on McClure and Shirley. They're going to do a second pass. The goal is for DRC to get up all the large debris by Friday. And so our staff have been reassigned to get those smaller piles so that it doesn't slow down DRC this week. So we began our new process starting today of post-disaster, pre-disaster planning, all in one. And that translates to get all the debris up immediately, even if we don't have a place for it. So what you're gonna see is there's gonna be piles at Shoreline Park South, and we're just trying to move it, wet it, tamp it down.
Better than have it floating around.
Most
On
definitely.
the floor, surely.
Most definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
Sorry about that.
Who else would like to speak tonight?
Yeah, I'm Richard Ward, 111 Shirley Drive. Sort of following up with Larry, just realized the storm has been upgraded to a Category 1 hurricane, and we're still well within the eye of uncertainty of where it may come. So, Samantha, I heard you say that, you know, we're gonna put a 6-inch pump. My question is, when will that pump be there and when will it be running? Because if we're not, as you just said, you know, 40 hours ahead of a storm event, that we've got it, and then if we're on a rain ban like we had before, that's gonna start hammering us probably late Wednesday to Thursday.
Yes.
So we're gonna be behind the 8 ball again if that doesn't, you know, if we don't get something done there.
Yes. So last time, the game plan was 72 hours prior. So it was Sunday that you saw the pumps go out. The pumps were tested. It was reported to me that they were tested Sunday. And so, obviously the day of landfall, Wednesday, I'm driving around with Mayor Fitch and come upon Larry, who is out there at the pump because it's not working. And so that, as you can imagine, that is not what is supposed to happen. And so that is what we've been doing right now, assessing the equipment that we have, making sure it operates. And I will let you know in the morning, you know, as soon as that pump's out there. I can just share with you that they confirmed it'll be a 6-inch, but I didn't ask.
So the 6-inch and they're complaining, and I know they said, but, and just sort of following on what Larry said, they did say that they were gonna alternate the pumps, and I was like, wait a minute, that makes no sense. And for the fact of, the hoses didn't even extend past the end of the street, so it never was connected up, and then there was an excuse. I know they said, oh, well, we don't have any hoses, but I know we physically walked around the corner and found 4 sections of hoses around the corner.
The hoses that were found, I think, were 6 inch. At that time, the pumps were 4 inch.
No, those
yeah.
were 4 inch hoses. I deal with this, I'm in business, so I understand what they
Right.
were, so, and I understand a failure, but.
Right, are you referencing the hoses that were by Randy's
Yeah,
house?
he's
No,
talking-
different
This is
hoses.
something, first time I'm hearing this. I pointed out the hoses that were behind my pond. It is a pile of 6-inch hoses been sitting
Yeah.
back there for a length of time that they needed to pick up.
Yeah,
But they could have used an adapter to go from 4 to 6-inch hose and ran that 4-inch pump on that 6-inch hose.
yeah.
There
They had
were-
an adapter before, I don't know where.
There are other 4 inch hoses right where the new manhole is now, where they were pumping McClure into.
Okay,
There were like 3 sections of hoses right there.
yes.
So, like I say, I know that there's failure that happens, but, you know, real concern is, like I say, I'm looking at timing and, you know, making sure that we're really proactive. Like I say, we missed it by a couple inches of flooding us again, so we just really want to make sure that
Yes,
the city is proactive with that.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Richard.
All right, anyone else?
Oh, my name's Craig Heath. I'm at 122 Shirley Drive,
All right.
and I just want to let y'all know, through y'all's efforts, or lack of thereof, I have 5 inches of water in my house. Think about it. How many of y'all been flooded before? One?
Yep. I had 6.5.
So maybe y'all would like to tell the experience of being flooded.
It's a helpless feeling.
Everything in your house, everything is covered with mud and sewage. They're down. And what's that from? Where did we fail? Anybody? You don't have adequate pumps. You don't have backup pumps. You don't have hoses. You don't have trained people. Come on. What impact did you put on my life? Think about it, my wife's life. What impact did you put on us? And I'm just one person. Look at Larry. Look at Mike. Look at Stephanie. Look at Judy. Look at Annie. Look at Tiffany. And those are the people on Shirley. What about the people on McClure? Go talk to those people. What are you doing for them? Really? Really, you're going to flood us? I mean, take some responsibility. That one guy, what was his name? Sam? He came up, he took zero responsibility. Zero. Absolutely no responsibility. He was trying to talk his way around it. Now I'm flooded. All my stuff is out in the street. Clothes, everything, you know. Sure, I have a few things. And where am I living? Where am I living right now? I'm in my house because I got no place to go. I don't have the money to go in. So just think about what y'all are doing and the people that work underneath you. Have them please take some responsibility. Please ensure they understand their jobs and how it affects the community, the people that they're serving. I mean, come on.
I understand.
Come on, I mean, really.
You're right.
Exactly.
How long do you think this is going to affect me?
Pretty
Do you
long.
think this is just going to happen in a couple of weeks, it's all okay? A couple of months, it's okay? That's not the way it works. It's not the way it works at all. So please, just please, put a little more effort into it. Get with your crews and make sure they understand their job and their responsibility. Because I tell you, those yahoos that were out there, that put that pump out there, they didn't show much concern at all. They didn't know what they were doing, didn't come across knowing much of anything. It was like, oh, we're going to throw out this hose, turn on the pump, and we leave. Go drink beer or whatever they do. But I'm flooded. My wife, she's in Louisiana now. Her car is flooded. It has a lot of impact, and I'm just one person in front of you right now.
Sure.
Think about all the homes there on McClure and the people there on Shirley Drive have been severely impacted from a lack of having a pump, hoses, and personnel and backup equipment, and really taking it seriously. I mean,
Believe me, we are, and I know from the time that we heard that pumps failed, and it happened numerous places, but it wasn't for a lack of trying to be prepared as best we could. That's why they went out 3 days early and started setting stuff up. And I understand it didn't work, but I don't want you to think we did nothing to try to take care of it.
no, I know something was done. It's just not enough. Come on. Come on, this is hurricane preparedness. You don't think about, well, the hurricane's supposed to hit New Orleans, so we're not gonna worry about getting ready. You're in hurricane season. You should have your act together for hurricanes. You gotta have good equipment. You gotta have trained employees. You gotta have backup equipment. You gotta have a plan, and you gotta make sure it's gonna work. And you gotta drill it until the people that work on this and set it up know exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm not gonna thank y'all.
Who would like to come up next?
Can I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Your name
I'm
and
Ellen
address.
Schwartz. There used to be, this is only for information.
I'm sorry, your name and address?
Ellen Schwartz, 107 Shirley Drive.
Thank you.
Yeah. There was a gentleman that worked at the city, his name was Vernon. And he apparently was head of that particular department that put out all this equipment. When he was in charge, there was never a problem. So it may be the newer, I don't want to call it newer generation or newer people, they probably don't know that much about the larger pumps or whatever. I think those are the ones that probably need to be trained.
I completely agree with what you were saying about personnel and training. And so to share with you a little bit about the department, you have a new, I say new, but your department director was, the prior disasters, he was in charge of the wastewater treatment facility. And so he was over lift stations. So this is the first disaster that Jason Randall has been over. Sam Wilson created, to my knowledge, the first stormwater utility in Northwest Florida. He absolutely knows stormwater. His limitation is that he's been on the job here for 8 months. And so under Sam, you had a supervisor, not to talk too much about personnel matters, but we were very impressed with this individual, also a newer employee. He was the responsible supervisor for the individuals underneath him. His entire crew was new. He has been terminated as a result of a lack of performance during the storm. And so we do hold people accountable. This information is going to be in the after action report. What I have to distinguish is the mechanical failure, which is the fact that I am hearing people, you had 27 inches of rain in 48 hours. We had 22 inches of minimum in 24 hours. And so what is the expectation of the pump? When we say that it did not flood before, it flooded in 2014 when Vernon Prather was director. Absolutely, Vernon had more institutional knowledge than the individuals that we now have on staff. What you hear Mayor Fitch saying is it wasn't a lack of having a plan. The failure came in the execution, right?
Yes.
Because Mr. Heat is correct. We had individuals who were newer in that position, and they had, in my opinion, a supervisor who didn't want to be here on a weekend and didn't take it serious, and that's why he's no longer here. I take responsibility for all of that. All of that ultimately comes down to me telling this council, we know our areas of vulnerability, and that's where we're going to focus our attention, and on me telling Larry Cannon, we got this.
Yeah.
We are focused on this.
And I think
so.
the other problem has been over all these years, I've lived here in Upways for 50 years, as JB knows. Excuse me, the pipes that were put around the perimeter of McClure and Shirley Drive, they're never empty. They're always half full, no matter how much they pump. It's just never pumped out enough. When the next rain comes, they fill up quickly. And when these big pipes are full, it goes up into the street. The other thing, the hotel and also Publix, when they were built, they're supposed to have their own system underneath them. But when you go in a really big rain, it bubbles up because whatever the system they have is just not adequate enough for all of the buildings that are there. The water bubbles up, and we are a lot lower than Publix and the new hotel. You know, there's quite a bit of difference if you even look at the street. And so that is part of the problem also.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I don't know, I'm a housewife, so I don't know that much about it.
Well,
Yeah.
I appreciate that information. It is good. And I just hope that everyone hears that we hear what you're saying and we all are very sorry and agree that we have improvement.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, come on up.
Amelia Gandy, 314 Washington Avenue. Mine stems off of the flood issue, but in 12, of course, on Washington Avenue, I was the last house that flooded on that street. But tonight I'm here on behalf of, I know Sam Wilson is on the phone and he'll be addressing his main concerns. And also Peggy Lay, who lives on the other side of Sam's rental house. I guess basically my question, and we're all asking on the street, the lift station's there, but there's no backup power. Why? Why can't the city afford some generators to put on those pumps to make them work if there's no electricity? Because there's no use of those pumps. Because Sam's renters were 3 inches from flooding, and I was praying to God that it would quit raining because I had an inch in my house before. So I feel really bad for the person who had 6.5 inches because I lived it. It was only 1 inch, but I didn't lose everything, thank goodness. And I know I really appreciate all you all did. You spent the money on the sewage through the street, and we have the lift station. But our big concern, all of us on that street, is why there's not backup power for the lift station.
And I would like to share with you just an update in the morning if I could, because we have been talking about that particular lift station and the communications we've already received from you. But I'm not as prepared as I need to be with details of the particular lift stations. I got a report on where we are with the status of generators. So I just want to assure you that it was on the top of everyone's list to, assess that there's different issues with different lift stations. So I'd like to give you some positive information, but I'll need to do that in the morning. I hate to put you off, but I want to give you a specific.
I just want our voice heard, and also Nikki that was here. She had to leave, but she was on the verge of, flooding as well, and she's a single person, has nobody. So anyway, appreciate your time. Thank you.
How about Mrs. Layhouse? Did hers flood?
Gordon is living with her now, her son,
Mm-hmm.
and he was he put a dry vac in there, was able to suck some water out of there.
So she didn't get it too bad.
No, but
Okay.
Sam Wilson, the house 3112,
Mm-hmm.
I believe is his address. I know he's on the line because we agreed we'd all
When
be
you say
here.
Sam Wilson, you talking about the
It's
contractor?
a different one. He lives on Fairpoint.
Right, not the employee. 'Cause
No.
I know that's Sam Wilson. Yeah, when I heard of working for others, that he works for us?
Yeah.
But then I realized it was a different Sam Wilson.
So Sam is
Okay.
more well versed in the subject because of his business, but again, I'm here to represent.
I know Sam.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I've worked with him.
Thank you.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
Thank you.
Maybe hold on.
Oh, yeah, okay, yes.
Mr. Wilson, are you on the line?
Yes, he is on the line. Here, let me put him on.
Thank you.
Oh, that's Sam? Oh, good.
Hello.
Must be
Hi,
Smith.
Sam. You are, everyone can hear you, so. Are you there?
Oh, no, he sat there all the time. We
A
lost
little
him.
caller?
He's asleep.
I got his phone number.
Put him on speakerphone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay, great. I'd just like to say thank you for hearing your conclusions. Amy, I think you did a great job speaking on behalf of people from Washington. And yes, I live here at 254 Fairpoint, and I own a house at 312 Washington, and I just remodeled it a year ago. Spent a lot of money remodeling it, and I was the only reason I remodeled it was because the city came in there after the 2014 flood and put all the pumps in, the lift stations and everything else, and I thought this place will never flood again. And I put my money into the city, remodeled the house, there's some nice things in there, and storm came last week, and went over there Wednesday morning, and the power was out, and the water was about 3 inches from coming into the house. I think we made several phone calls to the city, got a response that said they would take care of it, they'd work on it. I went down and bought an $800 back there and put it in my crawl space and started sucking water out of the crawl space into the storm drain in Washington. I guess the power did come back on at some point on Wednesday night, and the water dropped on Washington Avenue, but it was still the whole backyard. We probably had a foot of water still in the backyard after the storm drain came. 16 inches in the backyard. And actually, I think, JD, you had a question about Miss Lady's house. Yes, she has a crawl space also. She had water underneath her whole crawl space, and I'm sure her whole air conditioning system is damaged. She said there was water, floor grates in there, so she definitely has some issues going on also. But anyways, I had the whole house, dehumidifier under there. It got damaged. My air conditioner got damaged, and I took water in the shed. I'm just kind of, I wasn't expecting that. I thought the pumps were going to work, and that's why I invested City Hall Free to remodel the house, and I'm just kind of hoping you guys can come out there and put some type of generator on it. Even if it's a natural gas generator, I think there's a company in town, Pensacola Pumps and Power, they can come out and put LP generators in there. You can hook them up with natural gas, and as soon as power goes out, kick on, you can probably elevate them enough where you don't have to shoot, you don't have to worry about generators. That's just one idea that I think would be an option for you.
All right, thank you very much. And we appreciate the information, and we're working on it. That's like a major project right now, especially for this week with what we're hearing, so thank you.
Okay, great, thank you, and hope we can resolve this in the future, or maybe even get a backup generator out there this weekend.
All right, we are looking into it. They're meeting regularly, needless to say, about what they can get where, so we're doing everything we can, so know that.
Okay, all right, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for calling in.
Okay.
Bye-bye. And thank you, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name, but thank
Amy.
you for, Amy, okay.
Every
Thank you for-
well, it's Amelia, but Amy.
Well, thanks for speaking to us as well. All right, okay, I think that any other public forum? All right, I think that we are adjourned. Oh, council comments. Sorry, okay. Randy, go first. I think you must have a
Okay,
comment.
well, as Sam knows, I had a pretty good conversation with her in regards to the shortcomings that occurred with Shirley McClure. And, yeah, I know we flooded in 14 and Vernon was here, but after 14, while Vernon was here, we did not flood. We've had a lot of rain events that we've had some serious amounts of rain, and I can show you that. I've kept a log for years because I flooded, my house flooded, so I know what it's like to go through that. It is not a pleasant experience. But between Vernon, myself, and Larry, we always kept Shirley McClure's pumps going and dry, and we've been through a lot of events that we could have flooded, and we did not. So for 6 years, or 5 or 6 years after that flood, between the diligent work between what we got from Mr. Vernon and Larry, myself and others, we kept that neighborhood dry. And, you know, the mechanical problems should not have occurred. They should have been addressed before the pumps came out. They were not. And I think the inexperience of the staff that we have now contributed to the failures as well, because if we put 2 pumps out, we need 2 pumps running. And we may have done all that we could, but it wasn't all that could have been done. It could have been done better, and it could have maybe prevented some of those houses from flooding. And Mr. Stroth is correct, that, you know, once the water exceeds the capacity of Publix and other facilities around, their design plan is only for a 100-year flood event. And once you get past that, all bets are off. Water's gonna flow where it goes, and people are gonna flood. It's a shame that that occurred, but we need to be better prepared. I'm surprised that we have electric pumps out there that didn't have backups for that. I think being proactive is better than reactive after the fact. We need to look to see if we can't get some generators for some of these pumps, so that in the event they lose power, they don't do like Sam Wilson's house did, where he got water because there was no electricity. He called, he couldn't get anyone. That's, you know, I don't understand why we couldn't have had some generators out there. Same thing with the lift stations. Nobody wants storage in their house, and that is a nasty thing to get backing up. It would have seemed to me that we would all have backup abilities for one of those pumps. And if they don't have a generator, I noticed that we put out pumps that will actually take the place of the lift station. You know,
Bypass pumps.
diesel pumps.
Yes.
Yeah, so we need to cover all those Swiss cheese holes that are out there. And I'm really, you know, disappointed that we could have done a better job, you know, so. I feel for Larry and his people on Shirley McClure. That's a horrible thing. It took me over a year to get through it. I'm assuming that this gentleman may take at least that amount of time to fix his place that was here. So, yeah, I'm disappointed with that. I don't know where we are with getting the proper person to address these issues. They probably should have been here at this meeting tonight.
I'm not prepared. It's not on the agenda to have any type of an after-action report. As I've shared, we're in the midst of doing that, but unfortunately, we're now preparing for the
Right,
next
so now that
storm.
we have an opportunity to do something, we need to make sure that pump gets out there and it is functional and the hoses are running. The two pumps can run separate, independently of each other and not be one at a time like that was done. That was a waste of energy and effort.
Same way in Washington. We have in the generator, backup generator for there.
Exactly, that's what I said, we need, can
Again,
we
we
not
had
get a
generators, we had more
generator?
generators than we used. The issue with the generators is that we didn't have adapters, and we had one electrician who was having to hardwire generators into lift stations.
Hey, I've
And
done that, I've hardwired a generator to my house.
Understand, wish I had the foresight of having half a dozen electricians or adapters prior. I did not realize that there was a shortage prior to the storm. And so we're going to obviously make sure that we focus on those vulnerabilities and do better in this next storm. You won't hear me making any excuses at all. And every natural disaster, you hope that it's going to make you better and stronger next time. So we totally take responsibility, and we are focused with laser precision on generators.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect you, Sam, to know that personally, but someone under you should know that and what they need to get this thing working. Or, okay, if I can't use this connector, what can I do to make it work and get it going? Can-do attitude. They wire it in direct, like there's ways to do things. And I just don't think.
Could I make a suggestion on that? Like the Grand Marlin, and I do stuff, we've got lift stations. And typically what we do on the lift stations is we put an external connector, watertight connector on it that a typical generator can plug directly into it. And there's an internal switch that just switches to the Gen 7.
And boy, aren't I gonna be an expert when all this is over. Some of our lift stations do have that.
Yeah.
And some don't. And that's part of, the questions that are being asked are excellent questions. I can't answer right now why we don't have generators on all of them, but as I've said, to different citizens, if the answer is generators, I will count myself the luckiest city manager moving forward, because that is an easy thing to solve. The only reason why you hear me managing expectations tonight is that there were different variables and there were different equipment failures. But as it relates to providing generators, that's something that we can do. So you can believe
Right.
we're focused on that.
Are they available right now?
Well, the issue is the adapter, and so that's what we're working on right now. Yes.
But it's not just the equipment failures, it was staff failure as well. that could
Again,
have
we're going to
prevented
go
it.
through, I promise you'll be able to get more lumps. You'll certainly be able to, we are going to show warts and all in the after action report. It's going to be
I know, just
very
don't
honest.
keep
It's
doing
part of the
after action
process.
reports. I'd like to say is, hey, we did good on this one.
JB?
So, Other than, no, not saying downplaying, but Shirley, Washington, what, did Camille flood? And was it, what other
So,
areas flooded?
We have not had a 100-year flood event. Since 2014 was a 500-year flood event. But in the last 6 years, the council have invested $6 million in 6 years. You have not had a 100-year flood event. So you went from a 500-year flood event to another 500-year flood event. There you had 300 homes flood. In this event, you had 21 homes flood. The differences being in back in 2014, you had days of rain, and so the water tables were saturated. But at the actual event itself, you did not have as much rain within that 24 hours as you did with this. So to me, it is comparable because even though the water table wasn't saturated, there's nowhere for 22 inches of rain to go in 24 hours.
Right.
So the interesting thing was in 48 hours, I mean, it was soaked in, but that first 24, everybody, was feeling it. It is comparable. And so the takeaway is where the council have invested your infrastructure, that $6 million is very well spent. You just can't argue you went from 300 homes flooding down to 21. But the areas that in our heat map that we showed as vulnerable didn't surprise us. They were still vulnerable. That is where we focused our attention. And the reason why I say we lost the game on game day is because if that's where we're taking a strategic approach, then we should have seen results. And in some areas we saw results, but in other areas we had both equipment failure and we also were just punished by having new staff. And so that's where we have to make improvements. But sitting here as a city manager, I'm just telling you, you have entirely new staff. And so it did hurt us. And you don't hear me arguing that. What we can only do from that is to make sure that now as we go back and we're reviewing the emergency operations plan, they're going to take it serious now. You know what I mean? And so that is a hard pill to swallow if you're on McClure and Shirley and they had the most significant flooding. They had the most structural damage.
Well, I was on the council in 2014 when it happened, so I remember there was a lot more areas of flood.
300 homes. That doesn't count the
apparently
yards.
Some of the stuff is working that we did.
Most significantly. And the real tragedy here, McClure and Shirley, again, I want to talk about this in a bigger picture because there's always the danger of a political approach. Just put generators on everything, that'll fix it. And I'm going to be honest with you and say it was more than one issue. And I'm going to bring all of that to you. But as it relates to McClure and Shirley, I found out during the storm that they did not have internet service for 2 weeks prior to the storm. So during the storm, what I'm seeing are garbage cans up at the street. I see only one home that has sandbags. So we put out a heat map and told people if you're in this area, you need to take action. You need to get sandbags now. You need to bring in your garbage cans. And obviously this area is primarily renters and they did not get the message. So we had natural gas crew people bringing sandbags during the event. How many homes had 1 or 2 inches of rain that we could have prevented something if we had made sure that they were better communicated with? They were not getting the call them all calls because they're renters. That's going to the owner of the property. So there's a lot of things that we could do better that in hindsight. And so anyway, I just want you to know we're looking at the big picture and our report card comes from those areas that have not benefited from the new infrastructure we put in place. And the biggest tragedy on McClure and Shirley is it should have been connected to the East District stormwater system. But because Plantation Hill had a water line which had not been recorded. It wasn't on a map. And so as we were doing that project, they uncovered it. It was unforeseen and it required a modification to the design plans. Because of that holdup, McClure and Shirley was not connected. It would have been the difference of about a week. And we would not be having this conversation. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot of coulda, woulda, shouldas.
I thought it was all part of the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's not due to finish the job supposedly
Yeah,
until December anyway, so that was.
But the connection would have already happened. And that's just
I heard it was a sewer line, okay.
Oh, sewer line?
That's what I heard it was.
Well, again, it'll all be in
the WART report.
In the WART report, that's what we'll call it.
Different kind of water.
Yeah, kind of don't want.
Okay.
I'm done, I'm sorry.
You're done?
Okay.
All right, Todd?
Thank you for hanging in there. I'm sorry to hear about everybody that had those issues. I do think we have the will here to make sure that we get this kind of thing turned around.
Tom?
I have nothing to add.
All right, and I do want to really thank Samantha and Chief and, Shane, who were the three umbrella people for this, because I know how early they started planning and getting things together and, trying to get ahead of it. And I hate it too that Shirley Report flooded again, that your area, but it was not through lack of planning ahead and doing what we thought would work. And so, but you are not lost on us, any of it. And, McClure and Shirley, hopefully, wouldn't be by this weekend, but, in a month and a half, that should be a problem gone, but we'll see. That doesn't help us with it. So thank you all for coming and for hanging in here with us so long tonight, and for the suggestion you made too. We appreciate that. All information is good information at this point as we figure out the direction to go in. All right, so thank you all and adjourn.